Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the brutal initiations of ancient Spartan warriors. Not the Hollywood version, you know, but a harsh reality where survival was the first lesson learned. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. You're standing in ancient Sparta, where the sun beats down with the intensity of a drill sergeant's glare, and everything smells faintly of sweat and determination. It's around 650 BC, and this isn't just any Greek city-state. Oh no, this is Sparta, the place where childhood dreams go to die and warrior legends are born. But how did Sparta become the poster child for ancient warrior culture? Let's dive into the gritty details, where the romance of Spartan valor meets the brutal reality of the Agoge training program. First up, why did Sparta decide to pour its collective heart and soul into military might? Well, it wasn't just on a whim or because they loved the sight of shiny bronze. Economic and political factors played a huge role. Think of Sparta as the underdog city-state that was tired of getting sand kicked in its face by its neighbors. To put it bluntly, after a few too many close calls and territorial disputes, Sparta decided it was high time to get serious about defense. And by serious, I mean they went full-on military-industrial complex before it was cool. Sparta's shift towards a warrior society was driven by a need to control the Helots, a subjugated population that vastly outnumbered the Spartans. The Helots were the people they had conquered, and they were none too pleased about their situation. With a ratio of around 7 Helots for every Spartan, you didn't need to be a genius to see the potential for an uprising. The solution: turn every Spartan male into a soldier so formidable that even thoughts of rebellion would quiver at the mere mention of it. Enter the Agoge, the infamous training program that was less of a summer camp and more of a lifelong boot camp designed to turn boys into warriors. Picture this. At the tender age of 7, Spartan boys were snatched from their mothers' skirts and thrust into a world where compassion was as rare as a snowstorm in the Sahara. From this point on, they were part of the state's property, and their personal lives were as good as history. The Agoge was a place where hardship was the main course, served with a side of discipline, and the menu never changed. Training was rigorous, to say the least. Boys were taught to endure hunger, pain, and the kind of discomfort that would make modern boot camp look like a spa day. They were given minimal clothing, had to fight with each other to hone their skills, and were encouraged to steal food. But here's the kicker. If you got caught stealing, the punishment wasn't for stealing. It was for getting caught. A lesson in stealth, or a twisted form of character building. You decide. Now, let's talk about the economic angle. Sparta wasn't a rich city-state with overflowing coffers. They didn't have the luxury of funding a standing army with a never-ending supply of resources. Instead, they needed an efficient system where every citizen could contribute to their defense. This meant that every Spartan had to be prepared to drop their plow and grab a spear at a moment's notice. The Agoge was not just about producing soldiers. It was about creating citizens who were soldiers first and foremost. Politically, Sparta was a bit of an anomaly in the Greek world. While Athens was busy inventing democracy and philosophizing about the good life, Sparta had a dual kingship system that was all business. 2 kings ruled concurrently, a setup that sounds like it should come with a sitcom laugh track. But in reality, it was a pragmatic approach to leadership, ensuring that one king could lead the army while the other handled affairs at home. This system kept Sparta ready for war at all times. So, why are we so fascinated by the Spartans? Maybe it's the allure of their unwavering discipline, or perhaps it's the romanticized image of the warrior standing his ground against impossible odds. The Battle of Thermopylae, anyone. But let's not forget the harsh truth behind the legend. A society that focused so intensely on military prowess came at a cost. Individualism was sacrificed at the altar of the state, and personal desires were crushed under the weight of collective duty. Yet, the legend persists, fueled by tales from historians like Herodotus and Plutarch. They may have sprinkled a bit of creative flair into their accounts, but the core of Spartan society was undeniably about creating warriors who were feared and respected across the ancient world. The agoge was the crucible in which these warriors were forged, a place where boys learned to live with purpose, even if it meant sacrificing their personal freedom. So, as you stand in the dust of ancient Sparta, with the echoes of history whispering around you, remember, what made the Spartans legendary was not just their prowess in battle, but their unwavering dedication to a life that demanded everything and promised nothing in return. Welcome to the world of the Spartan warrior, where the line between myth and reality is as thin as the blade of a well-honed sword. As we wander deeper into the dusty corridors of Spartan history, let's peek into the day-to-day grind of the young warriors in the making. Imagine being a 7-year-old Spartan boy, and instead of cozy bedtime stories, you're greeted with a one-way ticket to the agoge, Sparta's version of charm school, minus the charm. Here, the concept of it takes a village was redefined. The state was your new mom, dad, and slightly unhinged personal trainer, all rolled into one. The Spartan education system was less about Pythagoras and more about pancration, that delightful blend of boxing and wrestling where the only rule was to win. From dawn till dusk, life was an endless stream of physical challenges. Running barefoot over rocky terrain, check. Wrestling matches that would make WWE look like a tea party, double check. These young lads were toughened not just physically, but psychologically, prepared for a life where comfort was a foreign concept. It wasn't just the physical rigors that made the agoge infamous. It was the Spartan philosophy of learn by doing, or else. Take the clothes situation, for example. Spartan boys were given a single cloak to last them a year, which probably explains the invention of the Spartan layering system. Dirt, sweat, and bravado. The idea was to toughen them up for the harsh realities of life as a soldier. If you could survive a Spartan winter with nothing but a cloak and a steely resolve, you were well on your way to surviving a battlefield. And speaking of survival, let's not forget the infamous stealing clause. Food was scarce, deliberately so. Spartan trainees were encouraged to pilfer their meals from local farms. But here's the catch. Getting caught meant a beating, not for the theft, but for the incompetence of getting nabbed. In this twisted curriculum, stealth was a virtue, and the ability to outwit and outmaneuver was just as important as physical prowess. Primary sources like Plutarch give us a glimpse into this world, but take his accounts with a pinch of salt, preferably the kind you can sprinkle over the romanticized myths he peddles. Plutarch paints a picture of Spartan discipline that borders on the legendary, but let's be real. These were kids, not marble statues. The system was brutal, and the human cost was high. The relentless pressure to conform, to suppress individuality for the sake of the state, left scars deeper than any sword could inflict. Now, let's talk economics because, surprise, surprise, even ancient warrior societies had to keep the lights on. Sparta, devoid of the lush resources that their neighbors in Athens had, relied heavily on the labor of the Helots to sustain their economy. While the Spartans trained, the Helots worked the land, producing the necessary food and resources. This symbiotic relationship was as precarious as it was essential. The relentless training of the Spartan youth wasn't just to fend off foreign enemies. It was to maintain control over a Helot population that was always on the brink of rebellion. Politically, Sparta's dual kingship system might sound like a recipe for disaster. 2 kings, double the opinions, half the efficiency. But in Spartan society, it worked like a charm. One king could lead the troops into battle, while the other stayed home to ensure the city-state didn't collapse into chaos. This system allowed Sparta to remain in a constant state of readiness, a necessity when your entire social structure is built on the threat of uprising from within. But what about the costs of this relentless lifestyle on young recruits? The agoge was a crucible of discipline, but it was also a pressure cooker of expectations. The constant demands for conformity and excellence left little room for personal growth or emotional development. Spartan boys were molded into warriors, but at what cost? The societal pressure to embody the Spartan ideal crushed any hint of individuality. Personal desires and dreams were often sacrificed at the altar of duty. The romanticized image of the noble, disciplined Spartan warrior has an undeniable allure, who wouldn't be captivated by tales of valor and sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet, the reality was far more complex. Beneath the bravado and the bronze lies the story of a society that demanded everything from its citizens and promised little in return. For every legend of Spartan heroism, there was a story of personal sacrifice, of a child turned soldier before he even knew what childhood was. So, as we wrap up our day in the life of a Spartan trainee, remember, the allure of Spartan discipline is powerful, but so is the stark reality of their existence. The Agoge was a place where boys became warriors, but it was also a place where the cost of maintaining the Spartan way of life was paid in youth and innocence. As we move forward in our journey through ancient Sparta, let's keep pulling back the curtain on the myths to reveal the very human stories beneath. There's more to unravel in this saga of grit and glory, and we're just getting started. Let's keep pulling back the curtain on the Spartan saga. You've now got a sense of the grueling path from Spartan boy to warrior, but what kept the machinery of this warrior society humming? Enter the Syssitia, or communal messes, which were less about socializing and more like a never-ending episode of Survivor, Spartan edition. Imagine sitting elbow to elbow with your fellow warriors, sharing meals that were as much about sustenance as they were about solidarity. Now, the Syssitia wasn't your average dining hall. This was where the barns of brotherhood were forged, where every meal was a reminder that you were part of something bigger. Getting into one of these messes was no picnic either. It was a rigorous selection process akin to rushing a fraternity with a lethal initiation. You had to be voted in by your peers, and let's just say, they weren't handing out memberships like candy. A single black ball from an existing member and it was, thanks, but no thanks for you. Talk about a tough crowd. But why all the fuss over communal dining? Well, it was all about instilling a sense of egalitarianism among the warriors. Wealth and status outside the mess didn't matter. Everyone ate the same broth, shared the same bread, and contributed equally to the meal. If you couldn't afford your share, you were out. This wasn't just about food. It was about creating an indestructible unit. In battle, you stood beside the same men you shared your meals with, and that bond was supposed to make you fight with the ferocity of a cornered badger. Still, let's not get too misty-eyed over this Spartan camaraderie. The Syssitia were about as democratic as they got, which isn't saying much in a society that had all the egalitarian charm of a stacked deck. Outside the mess halls, Sparta was a rigidly hierarchical society. At the top of the food chain were the Spartiates, the elite full citizens, living the Spartan dream, if your dream involved constant readiness for war and a diet that was more functional than flavorful. Then there were the Perioikoi, the neighbors who were free but not full citizens. They handled trade and manufacturing, essentially keeping the Spartan economy from crumbling like a stale piece of bread. Below them, the Helots, the subjugated labor force doing the hard graft on the land. These poor souls made up the bulk of the population and were treated with all the tenderness of a drill sergeant with a hangover. They were crucial to Spartan society, not that you'd know it from their living conditions. Why the reliance on the Helots? Simple economic pragmatism. Spartan warriors couldn't spend their days tilling fields and still maintain the finely honed edge required for battle. Instead, the Helots did the heavy lifting, ensuring the Spartiates could focus on what they did best, training and war. But the Spartans never forgot the threat that came with having an oppressed majority. It's like living with a tiger in your backyard. You might be in charge, but you're always one slip-up away from becoming lunch. This precarious balance was maintained with an annual ritual known as the Crypteia, a secret police force composed of young Spartans who roamed the countryside, intimidating and sometimes eliminating potential threats among the Helots. It was a grim reminder to the Helots of who held the power, a twisted blend of social control and psychological warfare. Politically, Sparta's dual kingship was another mechanism that kept this warrior state ticking over. Two kings might sound like a recipe for endless power struggles, but in Sparta, it was more of a check and balance system. If one king got too big for his bronze boots, the other could reel him in. They also had the Gerousia, a council of elders who advised the kings and proposed laws, ensuring that wisdom, or at least experience, tempered the fiery zeal of their rulers. However, let's not pretend this was some utopian council of wise old sages. These were politicians, and like politicians everywhere, they had their own agendas and ambitions. Amidst all this, the Spartan ethos of simplicity and austerity was key. Luxury was seen as a threat to Spartan values, a slippery slope to weakness and decadence. They didn't just frown upon opulence, they practically declared war on it. Gold and silver coins were banned, replaced by cumbersome iron bars, Imagine trying to slip one of those into a vending machine. This wasn't just asceticism for the sake of it. It was a deliberate attempt to insulate Sparta from the corrupting influences of wealth and to keep their society laser-focused on military readiness. Yet the Spartan way of life, with its emphasis on discipline and duty, was not without its allure. Even today, the idea of living for something greater than oneself holds a romantic appeal. But it's crucial to remember that this came at a steep cost. Individuality was sacrificed on the altar of the state, and personal happiness was secondary to the needs of the collective. In the end, the Spartan system was as much a product of necessity as it was of ideology, an intricate dance between survival and supremacy. As we peer deeper into the heart of Spartan society, it's clear that the legendary warrior ethos was not just built on the backs of its soldiers, but also on the structure and sacrifices of its entire populace. The Spartan way demanded everything and returned little in the way of personal freedom or comfort. The allure of their legendary discipline and valor endures, but so too does the stark reality of the society that produced it. So, as we leave this part of our journey through ancient Sparta, remember, the myth of the Spartan warrior is compelling, but the intricate social and political mechanisms that sustained it are even more fascinating. There's more to uncover about this enigmatic society, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complexities of a world where every day was a battle against time, fate, and the ever-present specter of rebellion. As we delve further into the Spartan saga, let's tackle the juiciest, most overcooked steak of Spartan lore, the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. You've probably seen the movies, read the comics, or at least heard the phrase 300 Spartans, whispered in awe as if it describes some kind of ancient superhero team. But before you start imagining rippling abs and slow-motion combat scenes, let's cut through the cinematic fog and get to the crunchy, historical core. First, the basics. Thermopylae was part of the Greco-Persian Wars, where an alliance of Greek city-states, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, faced off against the Persian Empire under King Xerxes. Now, if you're picturing a showdown like the Super Bowl of antiquity, you're not far off, except the stakes were a bit higher than bragging rights and a shiny trophy. The Greeks were outnumbered by a literal tsunami of Persian forces. Modern estimates suggest anywhere from 70,000 to 300,000 Persians against a few thousand Greeks. Talk about an uphill battle. Now, let's clear up some myths. The popular tale tells of 300 Spartans holding the line against the Persian hordes, a narrative so heroic it practically shines. But here's the thing. Leonidas didn't just stroll into Thermopylae with 300 of his best buds. Nope, he had help from about 7,000 warriors from other Greek city-states. The 300 Spartans were the elite corps, sure, but they weren't going solo, and those 300 were actually a personal bodyguard unit called the Hippes, which might sound like a fraternity, but was more about spears than beer pong. The geography of Thermopylae was a strategic gold mine. The narrow pass meant that no matter how many troops Xerxes threw at the Greeks, only a few could fight at any one time. Think of it as trying to fit a herd of elephants through a doggy door. The Spartans and their allies used this to their advantage, holding off the Persians for 3 days. Their tactics were a masterclass in using terrain and discipline to offset sheer numbers, a trick worth remembering if you ever find yourself outnumbered in a particularly competitive game of paintball. But why did Leonidas and his men choose to hold their ground in what seemed like a suicide mission? Well, the Spartan ethos was all about duty and honor. Their culture revered sacrifice for the greater good, and Thermopylae was the ultimate expression of this belief. Plus, the delay the Spartans caused allowed other Greek forces to prepare for subsequent battles, making Thermopylae a strategic win, if not a tactical one. And then there's the infamous betrayal by Ephialtes, a local Greek who revealed a secret pass to the Persians. Thanks to him, the Persians outflanked the Greeks, leading to their eventual defeat. Talk about a plot twist worthy of a soap opera. But before we cast Ephialtes as the ultimate villain, remember this. History is written by the victors, and it's entirely possible that his motives were more complex than mere treachery. So, what was the political fallout from Thermopylae? Interestingly, the battle didn't just bolster Spartan reputation. It sent shockwaves through the Greek world. Sparta's stand at Thermopylae became a rallying cry. galvanizing Greek unity against the Persian threat. It was like the ancient equivalent of a viral meme, spreading tales of Spartan valor far and wide. This newfound unity was crucial in the subsequent Battle of Salamis, where the Greek navy handed Xerxes a stinging defeat. Sparta's influence on Greek politics jumped several notches post-Thermopylae. They were seen not only as military geniuses, but as the ultimate defenders of Greek freedom. Yet, this elevated status came with its own set of headaches. The cost of maintaining their warrior society was immense, and the pressure to live up to their legendary status was a weighty burden. The Spartan leadership had to balance their newfound prestige with the practical needs of their society, a tricky tightrope walk, given their precarious socio-economic structure. Let's not forget the economic realities either. While Sparta basked in its newfound glory, the war effort strained resources to the breaking point. The Helots, already simmering under the pressure of oppression, were pushed even harder to support the Spartan war machine. It was a classic case of robbing Peter to pay Paul, with the Helots as the overburdened Peters of the tale. As for the political landscape, Sparta's dual kingship and council of elders, the Gerousia, had to navigate these turbulent waters with care. They were the embodiment of the Spartan dichotomy, part warriors, part politicians. Their ability to maintain internal stability while projecting power externally was a testament to their unique political system, but it was also a tightrope act that could tip into disaster if mismanaged. So, as we wrap up this installment, remember that the legend of Thermopylae is both inspiring and cautionary. It shows the power of a unified stand against overwhelming odds, but also highlights the costs of such heroism. The Spartan stand at Thermopylae is a story of valor, strategy, and sacrifice, one that continues to capture our imaginations, even as we peel back the layers to reveal the gritty realities beneath. There's more to explore about the Spartans and their enduring legacy, but we'll leave that for the next leg of our journey through the annals of history. Until then, keep questioning the myths and savoring the realities. They are what make history truly fascinating. The Spartan legacy, like a well-loved myth, is a tapestry woven with threads of heroism and harsh reality. But as we step away from the incandescent glow of Thermopylae, it's time to explore how the very foundations of Spartan dominance began to crack. We're moving into a period where the Spartan military machine, once thought invincible, starts to show its age. Fast forward to the 4th century BC, and Sparta is no longer the unchallenged heavyweight of the Greek world. So what went wrong? First off, let's talk about the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC. This was the moment when the Thebans, led by the tactical genius Epaminondas, gave Sparta a reality check that would make even the hardest Spartan warrior flinch. Picture this. The Spartan army, confident as ever, marches onto the battlefield expecting another routine day at the office. Instead, they run into an innovative battle formation that flips the script. Thebans stacked their forces 50 deep on one side, a move that left the Spartan phalanx reeling like a boxer caught off guard by a sucker punch. The result? A crushing defeat for Sparta that sent shockwaves throughout Greece, signaling the end of their military supremacy. But let's not forget the economic and social factors simmering beneath the surface. By the time Leuctra rolled around, Sparta was already facing some serious cash flow problems. They'd been playing a high-stakes game of military whack-a-mole for centuries, and the bill was finally coming due. Their economy was heavily dependent on the labor of Helots, who were getting increasingly restless. Imagine living with a roommate who does all the chores while you focus on your hobbies. Eventually, they're going to want a word. The Helot revolts, always a looming threat, were becoming more frequent and harder to contain. Sparta's rigid social structure didn't help matters. The Spartiates, the full citizens of Sparta, were shrinking in number. Why? 2 words: inheritance laws. As estates were divided among heirs, the amount of land each Spartan owned dwindled, reducing the number of citizens who could afford to meet the obligations of military service. By the time of Leuctra, some estimates suggest there were only about 500 full Spartiates left. This wasn't just a manpower issue. It was a full-blown identity crisis for a society that viewed military service as the highest form of citizenship. Political alliances, always a fickle beast, were another thorn in Sparta's side. Their hegemony over the Peloponnese had always been maintained through a delicate web of alliances, but as their power waned, so too did their ability to keep these alliances together. The once loyal allies began to see the writing on the wall and jumped ship faster than a rat on a sinking vessel, further isolating Sparta on the geopolitical stage. The decline of Spartan dominance offers a sobering lesson in the impermanence of power. For centuries, they had been the epitome of military might, the ultimate guardians of Greek freedom. But their narrow focus on warfare, coupled with an inflexible social system, left them ill-prepared for the changing tides of the Greek world. Sparta's legendary discipline, while awe-inspiring, couldn't stave off the inevitable forever. In the end, the fall of Sparta wasn't just a military defeat. It was the unraveling of a societal tapestry that had been carefully woven over centuries. Their legacy, however, continues to echo through history, a testament to their enduring allure. The image of the stoic Spartan warrior, unfazed by adversity and unwavering in the face of doom, has been romanticized and reimagined countless times in modern culture. From movies to video games, the Spartan ethos of discipline and sacrifice remains a powerful narrative, even if the reality was far more complex. But why does this myth persist? Perhaps it's the simplicity of the Spartan ideal, a life dedicated to a singular purpose, free from the distractions of wealth and luxury. Or maybe it's the allure of their warrior code, a life where honor and duty reign supreme. Yet, as we peel back the layers, we find a society that paid a steep price for its legendary status, sacrificing individuality and personal happiness on the altar of collective duty. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of ancient Sparta, let's remember that the line between myth and reality is often as thin as a Spartan shield. The legend of Sparta is not just a tale of military might, but a story of human ambition and the eternal struggle to balance personal desires with the demands of the greater good. It's a reminder that even the most formidable empires are not immune to the ravages of time and change. The Spartan saga teaches us that discipline and strength, while admirable, are not always enough to sustain a society. Their story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of rigidity and the importance of adaptability in the face of evolving challenges. As we continue to explore the annals of history, let's carry forward the lessons of Sparta, remembering that true greatness often lies not in the battles we fight, but in the resilience and wisdom we show in times of decline. Alfred the Great, England's unlikely hero and all-around medieval overachiever, started his life in a way that would make even the most dramatic soap opera look like a stroll in the park. Born in 849, Alfred was the youngest of 5 brothers, and in the cutthroat world of 9th century Saxon politics, that pretty much condemned him to a life of obscurity, or so one might think. But history had other plans, as it often does, and Alfred's rise to power is a tale of both happenstance and sheer tenacity. Let's start with the family dynamics that make the Kardashians look tame. The royal household was buzzing with more testosterone than a Viking raid. Alfred's father, King Ethelwulf, had a brood of sons who could have given any Game of Thrones family a run for their money. Ethelbald, Ethelba, and Ethelred, names that sound like someone sneezed while typing, were all ahead of Alfred in the line to the throne. Yet, fate, in its infinite wisdom, decided to throw a series of curveballs that would eventually land Alfred in the top spot. Now, before Alfred could even pronounce kingdom, let alone rule one, he was carted off to Rome at the tender age of 4. Imagine being in a medieval version of a European grand tour, except instead of selfies at the Eiffel Tower, it's more like kneeling before the Pope. According to Asser, a monk who later became his biographer, Alfred was anointed by Pope Leo Roman IV himself. It's like being blessed by the medieval equivalent of a celebrity influencer, guaranteed to get you more followers, or in Alfred's case, a possible divine mandate to rule. Speaking of divine intervention, let's talk about Viking invasions, the medieval equivalent of a perpetual Monday morning. England was under siege, and not in a fun, let's build a pillow fort kind of way. The Norsemen were wreaking havoc across the land, pillaging with a gusto that would make any looter proud. From 793 onward, these Scandinavian seafarers were pretty much the uninvited guests who overstay their welcome, leaving a mess of burnt villages and terrified Saxons in their wake. Amidst this chaos, Alfred's brothers were playing a dangerous game of musical thrones. First, Ethelbald took the crown, only to die 5 years later in 860. Then it was Ethelbert's turn, but his reign was also cut short after just 6 years. The crown shuffled over to Ethelred, who, despite his valiant efforts, couldn't shake off the Viking scourge. Ethelred's health took a nosedive, and by 871 he was gone, leaving a 22-year-old Alfred in charge. Alfred may not have been the first choice, but he was definitely the last man standing. The Saxons, weary of Viking raids and endless succession crises, needed a leader who could keep his head above water while the ship was sinking. Alfred wasn't just thrust onto the throne, he was catapulted there by a series of unfortunate events that would have made Lemony Snicket proud. Now, Alfred's education, or rather, the lack of it, plays a significant role in his early years. Unlike his brothers, who were presumably busy learning the ins and outs of ruling a kingdom, young Alfred grew up without the benefit of formal schooling. But don't let that fool you into thinking he was an unlettered brute. The guy had a brain like a sponge, and a thirst for knowledge that would make a librarian weep with joy. The story goes, courtesy of that trusty monk Asser again, that Alfred, once inspired by a book of Saxon poetry, made a bet with his stepmother, Judith. She promised him the book if he could memorize every poem. Spoiler alert, Alfred won, which tells us 2 things. 1, he was a quick learner, and 2, never underestimate the power of sibling rivalries to fuel academic achievement. Yet, Alfred's story isn't just about luck and literacy. It's about navigating the messy, unpredictable waters of medieval politics with the kind of finesse that would make a modern-day diplomat proud. England was a patchwork quilt of small kingdoms, each with its own set of problems. Alfred inherited not just a crown, but a cacophony of issues ranging from Viking invasions to internal dissent. And here's where the myth-busting comes in. The romantic image of Alfred as the noble, unyielding defender of England glosses over the harsh reality of his early. The truth is, Alfred's initial attempts at leadership were rocky at best. His first real taste of battle came at the Battle of Ashdown in 871, a clash against the Danish army that was as brutal as it was critical. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Alfred and his brother Ethelred faced a formidable force. Ethelred, however, was too busy attending Mass to join the battle on time, leaving Alfred to take the initiative. Talk about being thrown into the deep end. Despite the odds, Alfred's forces emerged victorious at Ashdown, a rare and much-needed win for the beleaguered Saxons. But any victory was short-lived. The Danes regrouped and continued their relentless raids. Alfred was thrust into a perpetual state of crisis management, trying to hold together a kingdom that was fraying at the seams. In a world where power was often gained and lost at the tip of a sword, Alfred's survival until his brother's demise is nothing short of miraculous. His ascent to the throne was not the result of grand strategy or divine destiny, but rather the unpredictable ebb and flow of medieval mortality. Yet, it was precisely this chaotic backdrop that forged Alfred into the resilient leader he would become, setting the stage for a reign that would eventually earn him the epithet, the Great. So, there you have it, the makings of a king who was never supposed to be one. Alfred's early life is a testament to the unpredictable nature of history, a reminder that sometimes life doesn't follow the script, and that's where the real story begins. And so begins the real saga of Alfred the Great, the king who was never supposed to be, navigating a world that seemed perpetually teetering on the edge of chaos. Now, let's set the scene. It's 871, and the great heathen army, a name as terrifying as it is catchy, has its sights set on England. This wasn't just a band of marauding Scandinavians out for a weekend raid. This was a well-organized coalition of Norse forces, a sort of Viking Avengers, assembling to wreak havoc on the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The Battle of Ashdown marks Alfred's first major showdown with these Scandinavian stormtroopers. The battle took place in Berkshire, somewhere around January 8, 871, because nothing says Happy New Year like a bit of medieval warfare. Alfred, at the tender age of 22, was thrust into the role of military leader, a trial by fire if there ever was one. His brother, King Ethelred, was technically in charge, but was reportedly busy at Mass, leaving Alfred to take the reins. Classic Ethelred, always with the impeccable timing. Alfred's tactical brilliance shone at Ashdown. Picture this. The Saxon forces split into 2 divisions, with Alfred leading one and Ethelred eventually commanding the other. The Danes, not to be outdone, mirrored this strategy. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the battle was fierce and bloody, a true clash of titans. Alfred, demonstrating a knack for leadership under pressure, led a daring uphill charge against the Danes. It was a bold move, the kind that could either crown you a hero or leave you as a footnote in history. Spoiler alert, it paid off. The Saxons secured a rare victory, sending the Danes scrambling. But let's not romanticize it too much. The win was crucial, yes, but it was also costly. Battlefields in the 9th century weren't exactly known for their sanitary conditions, and casualties were high. The victory at Ashdown bought the Saxons some breathing room, but it was a temporary reprieve in a long and grueling conflict. The Danes weren't the type to pack up and go home after a single loss. They were more like a recurring villain in a TV series. You defeat them in one episode, and they pop up again in the next, more menacing than ever. The aftermath of Ashdown was anything but peaceful. The great heathen army regrouped and intensified its efforts, launching a series of attacks that would have made any modern military strategist sweat. Alfred, still wet behind the ears in terms of ruling, was learning fast that being king wasn't just about winning battles. It was about survival, both his own and that of his people. But it's important to recognize that not every story from Alfred's early reign was one of triumph. For every victory like Ashdown, there were setbacks that tested his mettle. The Danes were relentless, and the year 871 alone saw several more battles. The Saxons, under Alfred's leadership, faced defeats at places like Basing and Merton. These losses weren't just military disappointments. They were blows to the morale of a kingdom already stretched thin. Now, let's talk about the economics of war. Wars, as we know, are expensive. Even back in the 9th century, waging one wasn't just about assembling a group of willing fighters. It required resources, food, weapons, and of course money. The Saxon economy, largely agrarian, struggled under the weight of constant conflict. Fields went untilled as men were called to arms, and villages were left vulnerable to raids. It was a cycle of destruction that threatened to unravel the very fabric of society. The political landscape was equally fraught. Alfred had to navigate not just Viking threats, but also the delicate balance of power among the Saxon nobility. Loyalty was a commodity, and with the constant threat of Danish invasion, securing the allegiance of his earls and thanes was as crucial as any battle. It wasn't just about being a warrior king. Alfred needed to be a diplomat, a visionary, and sometimes a shrewd politician. And here's where we start myth-busting. The image of Alfred as the unyielding savior of England glosses over the messy reality of these early years. Yes, he was a capable leader, but he was also a young king learning on the job, making mistakes and facing defeats. The romantic notion of a flawless hero doesn't do justice to his story. Instead, what we see is a man resilient in the face of adversity, evolving from a reluctant monarch into a seasoned ruler. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Alfred's journey was only beginning, and the challenges he faced were far from over. The Danes were still a formidable force, and the road to peace was paved with trials, tribulations, and more than a few setbacks. Yet, it was through these early struggles that Alfred would forge the skills and resolve necessary to become the legendary figure history remembers today. So, there you have it, a glimpse into the tumultuous early reign of Alfred the Great. As we continue this journey, remember that history is rarely a straightforward narrative. It's a tapestry of events, choices, and consequences, each thread weaving its own story into the larger picture. Alfred's tale is no exception, a reminder that greatness often emerges from the unlikeliest of beginnings, tempered by the fires of adversity and the crucible of experience. And as we delve deeper into his reign, we'll see how these early trials shaped the man who would one day be hailed as the savior of England. So, as we peel back the layers of this medieval epic, let's dive into the year 878, a time when Alfred's life took a drastic detour, quite literally into the wilderness. Picture this: Alfred, the king who had navigated through the political quagmire and Viking onslaughts, suddenly finds himself stripped of power, wandering the marshlands of Somerset. This isn't just a bad day at the office. It's the kind of existential crisis that would make even the staunchest optimist question their life choices. The year began with a rude awakening when the Danes, led by the formidable Guthrum, launched a surprise attack during the Christmas season, a time when even the most battle-hardened warriors hoped for a brief respite from the chaos. Instead of chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Alfred got Norsemen storming his strongholds. The Danish army, like an unwanted holiday guest, overstayed their welcome, forcing Alfred to flee into the murky wetlands of Athelney with a small band of loyal followers. Now, let's talk about the infamous burning the cakes story. It's a tale that has been passed down through generations, mostly because it's endearingly relatable. We've all been there, right? One minute you're trying to get your life together, the next, you're accidentally setting your dinner on fire. According to legend, Alfred sought shelter with a peasant woman who, unaware of his royal status, asked him to watch over her cakes baking on the hearth. Distracted by the weight of his kingdom's woes, Alfred let them burn, earning a scolding that, if you believe the story, he took with remarkable humility. But here's where we separate fact from fiction. The story's charm lies in its simplicity, painting Alfred as a humble everyman king. Yet, there's no smoking cake pan of evidence to back it up. The earliest accounts of this tale don't appear until years after Alfred's death. It's likely more a product of folklore than fact, serving as a metaphor for Alfred's ability to rise from the ashes, or in this case, charred cakes, of adversity. While the cakes may or may not have burned, Alfred's spirit certainly didn't. His time in the marshes wasn't just about survival. It was a period of introspection and strategic genius. Cut off from his strongholds, Alfred used this low point to regroup and re-strategize. He set up a makeshift fortress on the Isle of Athelney, a spot chosen not for its 5-star accommodations, but for its strategic defensibility. Surrounded by impenetrable marshes, it served as a natural moat, a perfect hideout from which to plan his comeback. And comeback he did. By spring of 878, Alfred had rallied enough support to launch a counteroffensive. But let's not sugarcoat it. This was no small feat. Uniting the fractious Saxon nobles was like herding cats with a penchant for betrayal. Yet, Alfred managed to build a coalition, convincing them that their best chance of survival lay in unity against the common Danish foe. Enter the Battle of Edington, a showdown that would define Alfred's legacy. This wasn't just about reclaiming lost land. It was about sending a message. The battle took place in May 878, and while exact numbers are elusive, historical accounts suggest Alfred's forces were outnumbered. But Alfred wasn't just banking on brute force. He'd learned from previous encounters, understanding that victory required more than just muscle. It required cunning. Imagine the scene. Alfred's forces, a mix of weary Saxon warriors and newly rallied troops, standing shoulder to shoulder against the seasoned Danish army. The stakes were high, the tension palpable. Alfred's strategy was bold, an all-or-nothing gamble that hinged on a surprise assault. He caught the Danes off guard, and the Saxons pressed their advantage with ferocity and determination. The result, a decisive victory for Alfred. The Danes were not only defeated, but forced into a humiliating retreat. Guthrum, the Danish leader, was cornered, and Alfred, ever the shrewd negotiator, leveraged this victory into a strategic treaty. The Treaty of Wedmore, as it came to be known, wasn't just a peace agreement. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy. Guthrum agreed to withdraw his forces from Wessex, and in a move that would have made Machiavelli proud, Alfred insisted that Guthrum convert to Christianity. It wasn't just about faith. It was about forging bonds and reducing the cultural gap between the warring factions. Alfred's victory at Edington was a turning point, a testament to his growth as a leader. He transformed from a king besieged by crises to a ruler capable of orchestrating a comeback that would echo through history. But let's not delude ourselves with the image of an unblemished hero. Alfred's triumph was born from necessity, a gritty testament to his ability to adapt and thrive under pressure. The wilderness had been his crucible, and Edington his vindication. In the aftermath, Alfred didn't rest on his laurels. He knew that defeating the Danes on the battlefield was only part of the solution. The real challenge lay in rebuilding his kingdom, fortifying defenses, and ensuring that such a crisis would never catch Wessex off guard again. Alfred embarked on a program of reforms that would lay the groundwork for a more resilient and united England. But that's a story for another time. For now, we leave Alfred basking in the glow of hard-won victory, a king who rose from the marshes to reclaim his throne. The tale of Alfred the Great is far from over, and as we continue, we'll explore how he leveraged his newfound power to redefine what it meant to be a king in a land perpetually on the brink of chaos. Stay tuned for more on Alfred's journey from embattled monarch to legendary ruler. With his victory at Edington, Alfred wasn't just sitting back and admiring the battlefield laurels. No, he was already plotting his next move, as if the ink on the Treaty of Wedmore hadn't even dried. See, Alfred wasn't just fighting Vikings. He was waging war on complacency, and he had big plans to ensure that his kingdom wouldn't be caught with its pants down again. First up on the agenda, fortified towns, or bars, as they were known back then. A term that sounds like something you'd say after a gulp of strong ale. Alfred's vision was to sprinkle these bars across the kingdom like medieval fast food chains, but instead of happy meals, they served security and refuge. By the end of his reign, there were about 30 of these strategically placed fortresses. And what did this mean for your average Saxon villager? Well, instead of watching the horizon for the next Viking longboat, they could finally focus on things like farming and, not dying. Economically, this was a game changer. Trade routes became safer, and markets started to thrive. It's like Alfred was the medieval Elon Musk, except instead of electric cars, he was revolutionizing urban planning. The bars weren't just forts, they were economic hubs. Think of them as the medieval answer to the shopping mall, minus the food court, but plus a hefty dose of security. Next on Alfred's to-do list was the navy. That's right. The guy wasn't content just to control the land. He wanted to rule the waves, too. Imagine trying to build a navy in the 9th century. It wasn't like he could just pop over to the nearest shipyard and place an order. However, by 896, Alfred had a fleet that was the envy of the English Channel. He modernized ship design, creating vessels that were longer, faster, and more stable than the traditional Viking longships. Alfred's ships were the medieval equivalent of sports cars, designed to outpace the competition. But let's not get carried away with the idea of Alfred as the original Captain Jack Sparrow. His navy wasn't invincible, and the sea battles were more like chaotic rugby matches on water than the strategic maneuvers we might imagine. Still, it was a start, and it was enough to give the Vikings pause, a real feat for the time. Then there was Alfred's legal reform, a task that would make even the most patient lawmakers reach for the aspirin. Alfred's law code was a blend of Mosaic law, Christian principles, and a dash of good old Saxon tradition. It was like a medieval smoothie of justice, 1 part commandments, 1 part common sense. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just about laying down the law. It was about creating a sense of unity and identity among his people. Alfred's laws weren't just rules. They were a manifesto for a more cohesive society. And let's not forget Alfred's push for education. This was a guy who understood the power of the written word long before it was cool. He wanted his nobles to be literate, not just so they could read the law, but so they could participate in the running of the kingdom. Think of it as a crash course in governance for the medieval elite. But teaching literacy to the nobility was like trying to get a cat to do tricks. Lots of blank stares, and more than a few scratched arms. Alfred didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He personally translated works from Latin to Old English, making him a one-man translation service. The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius was one of his favorites, and in true Alfred style, he didn't just translate it, he adapted it, adding his own thoughts and interpretations. It was like the original director's cut, complete with Alfred's own commentary. Now, we can't forget the economic landscape shaping all these reforms. Alfred's England was still reeling from the Viking invasions, and rebuilding an economy that had been repeatedly pillaged was no small feat. Yet, Alfred knew that a prosperous kingdom was a stable one. He worked to stabilize the currency, understanding that a reliable coinage was essential for trade. It was a bold move, considering that most of the wealth at the time was tied up in land and livestock, not exactly what you'd call liquid assets. Alfred's reforms weren't just about survival. They were about laying the groundwork for a future where England could stand tall and proud. But let's not sugarcoat it. This was a kingdom perpetually on the brink of chaos, and Alfred was the guy trying to hold it all together with sheer willpower and a visionary eye. His story is a reminder that sometimes greatness isn't just about winning battles. It's about winning hearts and minds. Alfred's legacy wasn't just forged on the battlefield. It was written in the laws, towns, and schools that he left behind. As we dig deeper into Alfred's reign, we'll explore how his reforms continued to shape England long after the last Viking had sailed home, and how one man's vision could alter the course of history. But that's a story for another day, so stay tuned as we uncover more about the king who dared to dream big in a world that often felt small. Alfred's reign was like a masterclass in turning lemons into lemonade, except his lemons were Viking raids, and his lemonade was a burgeoning English identity. As we wind down this jaunt through history, it's time to peel back the layers of Alfred's legacy. The dude died in 899, but his influence was as sticky as a medieval ale spill. Let's get into why they slapped the great label on him and what that really meant. First off, let's talk about the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Alfred's credited with commissioning this chronicle, a sort of medieval newspaper that was part history, part propaganda. It's like if the New York Times and a royal PR team had a love child. But hold your war horses, Alfred didn't personally pen this tome. While he likely ordered its creation, claiming he authored it is like saying Steve Jobs built the iPhone himself. The Chronicle was a team effort, and though it glorified Alfred's reign, it was less about factual reporting and more about crafting a legacy. Imagine medieval scribes, quill in hand, spinning tales that would make even Shakespeare raise an eyebrow. So, did Alfred earn his great moniker? It's not like they had a king rating app back then, so we have to judge by his accomplishments. His military prowess, economic reforms, and educational initiatives were groundbreaking, transformed a fractured collection of kingdoms into something resembling unity. Alfred's reign was the medieval equivalent of turning a dilapidated shack into a livable home. He didn't just defend against the Vikings, he built a foundation for what would become a united England. But let's not get too misty-eyed. Alfred was no saint. His rule, like any, had its unsavory bits. He was a shrewd negotiator, often playing politics like a three-dimensional chess game. He knew when to flex his muscles and when to extend a hand. This balance of force and diplomacy was key to his success, but it also meant his reign was as much about power plays as it was about peace treaties. Alfred wasn't just the benevolent ruler some history books paint him to be. He was a king who understood that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to clean up a mess. And here's where the myth and reality tango. Romanticized tales of Alfred often skip over the nitty-gritty details. The man made tough decisions that didn't always win popularity contests. His law code, for instance, was as much about consolidating power as it was about fairness. The laws were more than a guide to justice. They were a tool to reinforce his rule. Alfred's vision of a unified England wasn't some altruistic dream. It was a strategic necessity in a world where the next Viking raid was as predictable as the tide. Alfred's education initiatives also get a lot of love, and rightly so. He was like a medieval Bill Gates, trying to make education accessible to the masses. But let's be real. Teaching literacy in the 9th century was like trying to teach a dog to moonwalk. It was an uphill battle, and while his efforts laid important groundwork, literacy remained the privilege of the few during his lifetime. His educational reforms were more about planting seeds than reaping harvests. Now, let's poke some fun at history's need for a good PR team. The stories of Alfred's life, like the infamous cake-burning incident, are more myth than fact. These tales serve as charming anecdotes, but they also highlight how history often prefers a good story over a complex truth. Alfred's image as the humble, wise, cake-burning king is a testament to the power of narrative. It's a reminder that history is as much about who tells the story as it is about the facts themselves. So, what did Alfred really leave behind? Besides a slew of bars and a revamped navy, his true legacy was the idea of England itself. He didn't just fight off invaders. He laid the groundwork for a national consciousness. His reign marked the beginning of a shift from scattered kingdoms to a unified entity. Alfred's England was the prototype of what would eventually become the nation we know today. It was a slow burn, but Alfred's vision was the spark. In conclusion, Alfred the Great was a man who rose from obscurity to alter the course of English history. His reign was a masterclass in adaptability, resilience, and vision. He wasn't just a king, he was an architect of a future that few could have imagined at the time. And while the myths surrounding him are as thick as a Saxon fog, the reality of his achievements shines through. Alfred's story is a testament to the power of leadership in times of crisis, a reminder that greatness is often born from adversity. So next time you hear about Alfred the Great, remember, behind every legend is a man who dared to dream big even when the odds were stacked against him. The sun's barely stretching its golden fingers over the horizon, and already Athens is buzzing like a beehive on espresso. You're smack dab in the heart of the city, where the air's thick with the earthy scent of clay and the clatter of artisans kicking their parter's wheels into motion. Welcome to the Kerameikos, the pottery district, where the hum of creativity mingles with the clang of commerce. It's the 6th century BC, and pottery is to Athens what smartphones are to Silicon Valley, a booming industry with serious clout. Now, before you dismiss these artisans as mere clay slingers, let's get one thing straight. Pottery isn't just about making pretty vases with swirling designs. No, sir, this is the backbone of Athenian economy. You see, Athens is knee-deep in trade networks that crisscross the Mediterranean like a particularly tangled web. Pottery is the Tupperware of the ancient world, and everybody wants a piece. Want to transport olive oil from Athens to the far reaches of Egypt? You're going to need an amphora. Hosting a symposium and need something to serve your wine in? Grab a kylix. The demand is insatiable, and Athens is more than happy to oblige. As you meander through the district, you'll notice that potters don't just churn out any old thing. They've got their eyes on the prize. Foreign markets. Athenian pottery is the Louis Vuitton of the ancient world. Stylish, desirable, and a symbol of status. Pottery from Athens is shipped as far as Etruria in Italy and the shores of the Black Sea. It's not just about making parts. It's about branding, baby. And Athens has crafted itself a reputation for quality and design that's hard to beat. Let's talk materials. The clay these potters use isn't just any mud they scrape off their sandals. It's a fine, iron-rich clay that, when fired, turns into that iconic red-orange hue. This stuff is like the secret sauce to Athenian pottery success. The slip, a liquid mixture of clay and water, creates the contrasting black designs that make these parts pop. It's a technique called the black figure style, and it's the ancient equivalent of going viral. Everyone wants a piece of the action. But what about the potters themselves? Surely, these creators bask in the glory and riches of their trade. Not quite. Potters are the unsung heroes of the Athenian economy. They're skilled, no doubt about it, but they're not exactly rolling in drachmas. In fact, potters occupy a peculiar spot in the social hierarchy. They're essential, yet often overlooked, much like the folks who keep the internet running smoothly today. It's a gritty job, but someone's got to do it. And while a master potter could earn a decent living, many others toiled away for basic sustenance, their artistry passed over in favor of the final product's glamour. Speaking of glamour, the designs etched onto these parts are more than just decorative swirls. They tell stories, mythical tales, epic battles, and scenes from everyday life. It's like Instagram, but in clay form. You've got images of Heracles wrestling lions, charioteers racing in the Panathenaic games, and guards doing what guards do best, meddling in the affairs of mortals. These stories aren't just for show. They're a cultural narrative, a way to preserve and communicate the values, beliefs, and daily life of Athens. And how exactly do these parts make their journey across the Mediterranean? Enter the bustling ports of Piraeus, just a stone's throw from Athens. Merchants load amphorae filled with olive oil, wine, and grains onto ships destined for far-off lands. It's a delicate dance of economics and logistics. The potters might not see the fruits of their labor firsthand, but their creations travel far and wide, spreading Athenian influence like seeds on the wind. So here you are, standing in the midst of it all, feeling the pulse of a city that's carving out its place in history, one part at a time. The Kerameikos is more than just a district. It's the beating heart of an economic giant. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the sound of clay being shaped and molded intensifies, each potter adding their own chapter to the story of Athens. It's a narrative of trade, artistry, and ambition, spun in clay and baked in the kilns, destined to endure through the centuries. In a world where everything is made to be disposable, these parts are built to last. They are the vessels of culture, economy, and history, reminding us that even the simplest of objects can tell the grandest of tales. As you walk through the district, the clamor of commerce and craft surrounds you, a testament to the enduring spirit of Athenian ingenuity. And as the clay dust settles in the Kerameikos, it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty of what makes these parts more than just glorified storage units. You see, pottery isn't just about slapping clay on a wheel and hoping for the best. Oh no, it's a precision operation, a dance of fire and earth that demands both artistic flair and technical savvy. First up, we've got the black figure technique, the bread and butter of 6th century BC Athenian potters. This was the original blockbuster style, like the ancient world's version of a hit Netflix series. With black figure pottery, artists would paint their designs with a refined slip that, after firing, turned a sleek black against the rich, red clay. Think of it as ancient Photoshop, where the contrast made the images pop with dramatic flair. The process involved a 3-stage firing technique that was nothing short of alchemical wizardry. You start with an oxidizing atmosphere, then switch to reducing, and finish with a final oxidizing phase. This pyrotechnic ballet, involving precise temperature control and oxygen levels, was the secret to achieving that iconic black-on-red look. And if you're imagining a potter leisurely crafting his masterpiece, think again. This was the Athenian potter's CrossFit workout. Intense, sweaty, and requiring serious stamina. But hold onto your amphory, because innovation didn't stop there. Enter the red figure technique, the new kid on the block around 530 BC. Why the shift? Well, it's all about the details, darling. Red figure pottery allowed for greater precision and subtlety in depicting human figures and scenes. Instead of painting the figures in black, potters left the red clay exposed for the figures and painted the background black. This reversal of colors was like switching from a flip phone to a smartphone. Suddenly, you could capture every nuance, every expression, with greater clarity. The red figure style was perfect for showing off the human form in all its glory, from the rippling muscles of athletes to the delicate drapery of goddesses. Now, let's dispel the myth of the romantic artisan. Picture a potter in a sunlit studio, serenely crafting his works of art. Yeah, that's a fantasy. The reality was more sweatshop than studio. Pottery production was a labor-intensive slog, a conveyor belt of creativity and exhaustion. Potters and their apprentices worked long hours, often in cramped and dusty workshops. They were part of a bustling industry that required not just skill, but endurance. While the master potter might enjoy a modicum of respect and a slightly fuller purse, many toiled in relative anonymity, their names lost to the sands of time. The economic engine of Athens was fueled by this very labor, the potters forming the cogs that kept the machine running. And let's not forget the economic realities that shaped this industry. Pottery wasn't just art, it was business. The Athenian potters were keenly aware of market demands, crafting pieces that catered to both domestic needs and foreign tastes. Shipping amphory was big business, and the stakes were high. Potters had to produce consistently high-quality wares or risk losing lucrative contracts. It was a cutthroat world, with competition as fierce as a Spartan warrior. Despite the grueling conditions, there was a certain allure to the life of a potter. Sure, the hours were long, and the pay wasn't always great, but there was a sense of pride in contributing to Athens' cultural legacy. These potters were, quite literally, shaping history. Their creations were the vessels of Athenian culture, carrying stories and artistry across the ancient world. And in a twist of irony, while the potters themselves may have been overlooked, their works have endured, a testament to their skill and innovation. So next time you see an ancient Greek vase in a museum, remember the hands that crafted it. Behind every elegant kylix and sturdy amphora was a potter who knew their craft inside out, who balanced artistry with the harsh realities of ancient economics. The pots may be silent now, but they speak volumes about the lives and labors of those who created them. And as we dive deeper into the world of Athenian pottery, we'll uncover even more about the techniques and technologies that defined this golden age of ceramic artistry. Stay tuned, because the kiln's just heating up. Now, as the kiln fires roar and the clay dust settles, let's take this Athenian pottery tour on a political detour. You see, these pots weren't just canvases for artistic expression or commercial gain. Nope, they were the ancient world's propaganda billboards, storytelling mediums, and sometimes even political hot potatoes. When you're in a city-state like Athens, where democracy's fledgling wings are just starting to flap, every part can tell a tale that goes beyond its glaze. First off, let's bust the myth that Athenian pots were merely decorative knickknacks. In reality, these ceramic babies were the social media platforms of their day. Want to spread the word about your latest military victory or remind citizens of the heroic deeds of their forefathers? Slap that narrative on a crater and let the visual storytelling do the rest. It was a kind of cultural currency, a way to reinforce communal values and shared myths. Take a look at the famous Francois vase, a 6th century BC masterpiece that's basically the Marvel cinematic universe of its time, featuring over 200 figures from Greek mythology. This wasn't just decorative, it was a massive cultural flex. But it wasn't all myth and legend. Pottery also played a role in the gritty game of politics. Athenian leaders knew the power of a good story told through art. They'd commission parts to depict scenes that aligned with their political agendas, like the triumphs of their ancestors or the wisdom of the gods who supposedly backed their rule. Imagine a kylix showing Theseus, the legendary founder hero of Athens, slaying the Minotaur. Not just a pretty picture. This was a nod to the idea that Athens was a city of strength and cunning, destined to lead. And here's where the plot thickens. Pottery was also a player in religious rituals and festivals. These weren't just empty traditions. They were integral to Athenian identity. Picture this. The Panathenaic Festival, a massive citywide celebration held every 4 years. Among the many activities was a grand procession that culminated in sacrifices to Athena, the city's patron goddess. And what did participants receive as prizes? Large, handsome amphorae filled with olive oil, adorned with images of the goddess herself. These parts weren't just prizes, but symbols of civic pride and religious devotion, reinforcing the connection between the divine and the polis. But wait, there's more. Pottery wasn't just used for grand festivals. It was woven into everyday religious practices. Consider the simple libation, a ritual pouring of liquid to honor the gods. The vessels used, like the kylix or the oinocho, were often decorated with scenes that mirrored the act of offering itself, creating a kind of visual feedback loop between human and divine. Now, let's talk economics because, let's face it, money talks even in ancient Athens. The demand for these parts, be they for propaganda, storytelling, or religious purposes, fueled an industry that was as competitive as a modern-day startup scene. And while artists had creative freedom, they also had to cater to market demands. If the trend was for parts depicting Athena, you could bet the potters would churn them out faster than you can say hubris. It was a delicate balance between artistic vision and economic necessity. Let's not romanticize this too much. The life of a potter was hard, and the stakes were high. You could be commissioned for a politically charged piece, and if you messed up, your reputation and your income could go up in smoke faster than a poorly fired amphora. It was a world where politics, economy, and culture collided, and the humble part was at the center of it all. So, as you stand in the Kerameikos district, watching the potters at work, remember this. You're not just seeing artisans plying their trade. You're witnessing the heartbeat of Athenian society, where every part was a narrative waiting to be told, a story etched in clay that carried the weight of political ambitions, cultural identity, and religious devotion. And while the parts themselves might be silent, they speak volumes about the complexities of the world that shaped them. Stay tuned, because we're just scratching the surface of this ceramic symphony. But let's not get too carried away with the romantic notion of potters as the unsung heroes of Athenian culture. Time to pivot, because those artisans also faced a gauntlet of economic challenges that would make even the most seasoned Wall Street trader break into a cold sweat. You see, the pottery industry wasn't just about shaping clay. It was about navigating a minefield of competition, resource scarcity, and market fluctuations, all while political changes played havoc like an ancient version of a stock market crash. So, let's talk competition. Picture the Kerameikos district as the ancient world's Silicon Valley, only instead of tech startups, you've got pottery workshops lined up like a row of artisanal coffee shops. The number of potters in Athens was no joke, and each one was vying for a slice of the amphoric pie. The competition was cutthroat, and you had to bring your A game just to keep your head above water. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just a local battle. Potters from Corinth and other Greek city-states were equally skilled, and they were hungry for a piece of the market action. It was a bit like the Olympics of pottery, where only the finest craftsmanship could secure a spot on the international stage. Now, let's throw some numbers into the mix, because what's an economic discussion without a few digits to chew on? It's estimated that a skilled potter could churn out around 200 pieces a year, but that was just the tip of the terracotta iceberg. The real challenge lay in maintaining quality while scaling up production. If your amphory didn't meet the high standards buyers expected, you'd be left with nothing but a pile of unsold parts and a sinking reputation. And in a market where a single amphora could fetch the equivalent of a week's wages for a labourer, the stakes were high enough to make anyone's pottery wheel spin. But competition wasn't the only hurdle. Resource scarcity was another major headache. Athens might have had clay in abundance, but the quality varied, and the best stuff was as coveted as a front-row seat at a Socratic debate. Potters had to source the finest iron-rich clay from specific quarries around Attica. And if you thought getting your hands on a PlayStation 5 was tough, try competing for premium clay in 6th century BC Athens. It was a logistical nightmare that required not just savvy negotiation skills, but also a bit of luck to secure the good stuff. And once you had your clay, you still needed wood to fire the kilns. With Athens growing faster than a philosophy major's student debt, the demand for firewood was astronomical. This led to deforestation concerns that would make modern environmentalists wince. Potters had to be resourceful, often resorting to using vine clippings and other agricultural waste to keep their kilns blazing. It was a delicate balancing act, with potters constantly on the lookout for fuel sources to keep their operations running smoothly. Now, let's spice things up with a dose of political drama. You see, shifts in power and trade embargoes were the wild cards that could upend the pottery game faster than you can say ostracism. Political changes in Athens were like a game of musical chairs, and every new leader brought a fresh set of policies that could either boom or bust the pottery industry. Take the tyrant Pisistratos, for example. During his rule, Athens saw a push for cultural exports, which was great for potters aiming to expand into foreign markets. But the flip side, trade embargoes and wars could slam the brakes on commerce faster than a chariot at full tilt. And speaking of wars, let's not forget the Persian conflicts that loomed over the horizon like an ominous storm cloud. Trade routes could be disrupted at any moment, and when you're shipping amphory filled with precious olive oil across the Aegean Sea, the last thing you want is a Persian trireme blocking your path. It was enough to keep any potter awake at night, contemplating the fragility of their economic prospects. Yet, despite these challenges, Athenian potters were nothing if not resilient. They adapted, innovated, and found ways to keep their kilns hot and their parts in demand. When faced with competition, they upped their design game, creating more intricate and desirable pieces to lure buyers. They formed guilds and networks to share resources and secure better deals on clay and firewood. And when political winds shifted, they pivoted, finding new markets or adjusting their production to meet the changing demands. Let's not sugarcoat it. Life as a potter was a daily grind, a constant hustle to stay viable in an unpredictable world. But it was also a testament to the ingenuity and tenacity of these artisans, who carved out a living in the face of adversity. Their legacy is not just in the parts that have survived millennia, but in the story of their perseverance and adaptability. So, as we continue to unravel the story of Athenian pottery, remember that behind every beautifully crafted amphora was a tale of grit and determination, of artisans who rolled with the punches and kept the wheels turning. Stay tuned, because this ceramic saga is far from over, and there are more twists and turns in store as we explore the depths of Athenian innovation and resilience. And here we are at the final act of our clay-spun saga, where we peer into the past to see how the legacy of Athenian pottery has shaped our understanding of history. You see, these parts are more than just relics gathering dust in museums. They are time capsules, preserving stories of a world where gods mingled with mortals, and art was as much about survival as it was about beauty. They whisper tales of a society that valued both the divine and the daily grind, where every amphora, kylix, and crater was a brushstroke in the grand painting of human civilization. First things first, let's debunk a myth while appreciating its allure. The romantic notion of potters as lone geniuses toiling away in serene studios is as mythical as Medusa's hairdo. In reality, these artisans were part of a bustling industry, more akin to a factory floor than a secluded atelier. Their lives were marked by the rhythmic grind of the potter's wheel, the relentless demand for new designs, and the ever-present pressure to deliver perfection. And yet, there's something undeniably captivating about the idea of these craftsmen, their hands stained with red clay, channeling their creativity into objects that would outlast them by millennia. But why should we care about old parts? You've got Netflix, after all. Well, these ceramics are like the social media feeds of ancient Athens, providing a snapshot of daily life, belief systems, and cultural priorities. When you look at a black figure amphora, you're peering into a world where myth and reality danced a delicate tango. Those scenes of Heracles battling beasts or charioteers locked in Olympian races were more than decorative. They were reflections of Athens' values and aspirations. In a time before selfies and status updates, pottery was the medium through which Athenians expressed identity, status, and shared narratives. Now, let's talk numbers, because that's where things get really interesting. Imagine the sheer volume of pottery churned out by Athens. From 600 BC to 400 BC, it's estimated that around 100,000 Athenian pieces were produced, with many shipped across the Mediterranean. Picture that. Enough parts to fill an ancient IKEA warehouse, each one a blend of art and utility, crafted for everything from feasting to funerals. These weren't just household items. They were the lifeblood of trade, the backbone of an economy that stretched its influence across continents. And here's a historical footnote with a twist. Athenian pottery was so prevalent in trade that archaeologists today use these shards, or sherds, as they're technically called, to date archaeological sites. That's right. These fragments of clay are the Rosetta Stones of the archaeological world, providing a timeline for human activity. So next time you see a shard of pottery behind glass, know that it's not just a piece of broken crockery. It's a puzzle piece in the story of civilization. But while we're busy romanticizing the parts, let's not forget the potters who made them, slogging away in workshops that were more sweatshop than studio. These artisans were the working-class heroes of their day, keeping the fires of commerce and culture burning bright. They lived in a world where artistic talent had to be balanced with economic savvy, where a potter's livelihood depended not just on skill, but on the whims of the market and the caprices of politics. It's a tale as old as time, the tension between art and commerce, creativity and constraint. So, what can we learn from these ancient creators? For one, their resilience. In a world fraught with uncertainty, they adapted, innovated, and persevered. They were the start-up founders of their time, navigating a landscape as unpredictable as it was competitive. And their legacy, it's one of enduring influence, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the lasting impact of art. In wrapping up our journey through the Kerameikos district, let's leave with a nuanced appreciation for the potters' contribution to art and culture. They were the unsung artisans who shaped history with every turn of the wheel, their creations a testament to the vibrant, chaotic, and ever-evolving tapestry of human existence. In their hands, clay became more than a mere medium. It was a language, a way of communicating across the ages. As you step away from this narrative, remember that every museum piece, every shard of pottery, is a reminder of our shared past. The parts may be silent, yet their stories are loud and clear. They speak of a world where the everyday was intertwined with the epic, where art was both a livelihood and a legacy. So next time you find yourself in the presence of an ancient Greek vase, take a moment to listen. You might just hear the echoes of a potter's wheel, the crackle of a kiln, and the whispered tales of an ancient world brought to life through the enduring art of Athenian pottery. Alexander the Great, the man, the myth, the guy who managed to conquer lands faster than most of us can finish a Netflix series. But alas, like all great binge watchers, his life came to an abrupt end in 323 BCE, leaving behind an empire sprawling from Greece to India. And just like any good cliffhanger, his death set off a series of chaotic events that made Game of Thrones look like a Sunday picnic. Enter the Diadochi, Alexander's generals, who eyed his massive empire like kids staring at an abandoned pile of Halloween candy. These guys were the ultimate power-hungry opportunists. They weren't about to let a little thing like a lack of a clear successor stop them from grabbing everything they could. In true soap opera fashion, these ambitious leaders turned the ancient world into their personal chessboard, each move more dramatic than the last. Now, let's set the stage. Alexander, in all his conquest glory, hadn't bothered with a detailed succession plan. You'd think a guy who planned military campaigns with the precision of a Swiss watch might have taken a moment to jot down who gets what when he shuffled off this mortal coil. Instead, we got a vague, to the strongest, or something equally cryptic, depending on which ancient text you read. Truly, it was the ancient equivalent of throwing a bouquet at a wedding, but with considerably higher stakes. The diadarchi, a term that sounds like a fancy Italian dish but actually means successors, were a colourful bunch. The main players included Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus and Lysimachus, each with their own power base and ambitions. And right here is where the chaos kicks in. Imagine these guys as the original cast of a reality TV show with less scripted drama and more bloodshed. The first round of wars, known as the Wars of the Diadarchi, began almost immediately. These conflicts were as convoluted as your favorite soap, but with even fewer coherent plot lines. Over the course of roughly 40 years, from 322 to 281 BCE, these generals and their descendants fought over territories with the enthusiasm of kids trading Parchment cards, albeit with a bit more at stake than bragging rights. Macedonia, Alexander's homeland, became the hardest piece of real estate in these skirmishes. Its strategic location and resources made it the perfect prize. Everyone wanted a slice, but holding onto it was like trying to catch a greased pig. The political landscape was as unstable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake, with alliances forming and collapsing faster than you could say diadarchi. Antipater, one of Alexander's old-timers, initially held the regency over Macedonia, but when he died in 319 BCE, the real scramble began. His successor, Parchment, found himself facing off against Cassander, Antipater's son, who wasn't too keen on waiting his turn. Cassander, proving that nepotism truly never goes out of style, eventually seized control, turning the Macedonian heartland into his personal fiefdom. Meanwhile, in a plot twist worthy of a daytime drama, Ptolemy grabbed Egypt, where he set up shop and declared himself pharaoh. This guy knew how to throw a party. He even snagged Alexander's body, a move straight out of a mobster playbook, as a way to legitimize his rule. The ancient world's version of he who holds the body holds the power. Seleucus, another key player, managed to carve out the Seleucid Empire, stretching from modern-day Turkey to India. He was the ultimate underdog, initially losing out in early power grabs, but eventually clawing his way to the top, proving that the diadarchi game was as much about persistence as it was about power. As for Antigonus, he fancied himself as the heir to Alexander's entire empire. Talk about delusions of grandeur. He controlled large parts of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and the Levant, and even took a shot at taking Macedonia. But spoiler alert, it didn't end well for him. The Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE was his swan song, where he faced a coalition of other diadarchi and lost more than just his dreams of empire. Amidst all this chaos, the map of the known world was redrawn more times than a toddler's doodle. Borders shifted, new kingdoms emerged, and old ones disappeared with the frequency of a magician's hat trick. Yet, amid the turmoil, these territories laid down the foundation for future empires, each ruler's ambition shaping the destiny of countless generations. These wars of succession, though drenched in blood and betrayal, were critical in shaping the Hellenistic world. They set the stage for cultural diffusion, where Greek culture spread far and wide, mingling with local customs to create something entirely new. This blending of cultures was perhaps the most enduring legacy of Alexander's empire, a testament to the complexity and interconnectedness of the ancient world. And so, the saga of the diadarchi continued, with each general's ambition leaving a mark on history. Their power struggles remind us that the past was no simpler than the present, filled with individuals driven by ambition, ego, and a healthy dose of opportunism. So, as we dive deeper into the chaotic aftermath of Alexander's death, remember, history is often stranger and sometimes more entertaining than fiction. So, with the diadarchi playing their epic game of geopolitical musical chairs, the ancient world saw the rise of the Hellenistic kingdoms. This was like the original influencer takeover, with Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Antigonus stepping into the spotlight, each trying to outdo the other in a frenzy of power moves. Forget Instagram. These guys were flexing their influence across continents. Ptolemy, the ultimate opportunist, had already snagged Egypt, but he wasn't content to just kick back and bask in the Nile's glory. No, this guy had bigger plans. He declared himself pharaoh, which was basically the ancient equivalent of dropping a mixtape and declaring yourself the king of rap. Not just satisfied with the title, he also orchestrated a brilliant PR move by securing Alexander's body. It was like carrying around a holy relic, only a bit more gruesome. But hey, it worked. Egyptians were convinced of his divine legitimacy, and Ptolemy solidified his rule over one of the ancient world's most prosperous regions. Meanwhile, Seleucus was out there pulling a rags-to-riches story worth its weight in gold. Initially sidelined and booted out of Babylon, he made a triumphant comeback, proving that persistence pays off. He became the ruler of the Seleucid Empire, which stretched from modern-day Turkey to the fringes of India. Talk about a comeback tour. His empire was a patchwork of cultures, peoples, and currencies, and yet Seleucus managed to keep it together with a blend of military might and some impressive diplomatic finesse. He was the guy who knew when to wield the sword and when to extend the olive branch. Antigonus, on the other hand, was the quintessential dreamer, or perhaps more accurately, delusional. He aspired to recreate Alexander's entire empire under his banner. In control of Anatolia and parts of the Levant, he was the guy who thought he could have it all. But like a cautionary tale from a rock ballad, his ambition was his downfall. The Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE was where reality hit him hard, and spoiler, it didn't end with a happily ever after. Still, his efforts did leave a mark, reshaping the political landscape and setting the stage for further conflicts. And let's not forget about diplomacy, the ancient art of saying, "Nice doggy," until you can find a rock. These rulers were masters of alliances, marriages, and let's be honest, a fair bit of bribery. Marriage alliances were like the ancient version of LinkedIn connections, only with more jewelry and fewer awkward networking events. Ptolemy married into influential families, strengthening his connections across the Mediterranean. Seleucus, not to be outdone, married into the Persian royalty, because why not bring a bit of old-world prestige into the mix? But let's pause for a moment and shed some light on the everyday folks caught in this political maelstrom. Imagine being a local, waking up one day to find that your town's Thursday pottery class was cancelled because it clashed with yet another royal decree or a new tax imposed to fund some general's war effort. Average citizen was left wondering what happened to the good old days when politics was something you complained about over dinner, not something that appended your entire life. The economic landscape was equally complex. These kingdoms were not just about military conquests, they were economic powerhouses. Egypt, under Ptolemy, became a center of trade and learning, with Alexandria standing as a beacon of Hellenistic culture. It was a melting pot of ideas and goods, where Greek, Egyptian, and other cultures mingled in a bustling marketplace of commerce and thought. Meanwhile, Seleucus had his eyes on the east, fostering trade routes that connected the Mediterranean with Asia. The Silk Road wasn't just a highway for exotic goods, it was a conduit for cultural exchange, bringing Greek influence deep into Asia and vice versa. It was less about high-minded ideals and more about the practicalities of keeping the coffers full and the people fed. As for Antigonus, his territories served as the crossroads of the ancient world. His rule in Anatolia connected Europe and Asia, making it a hub for trade, culture, and of course taxes. Because what's an empire without a bit of tax revenue to keep the wheels turning? In the end, these Hellenistic kingdoms were far from the romanticized visions of empire we often imagine. They were complex, dynamic, and at times brutally pragmatic. Yet they were also places of incredible cultural fusion, where Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and countless other traditions came together to create something new and enduring. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and battles, but a tapestry of human ambition, resilience, and sometimes plain old luck. So, as we continue our journey through the Hellenistic world, keep in mind that these kingdoms, born from the chaos of Alexander's death, were both a testament to the resilience of human ambition and a cautionary tale about the limits of power. Stay tuned, because the story of these kingdoms is far from over, and trust me, it only gets more intriguing from here. Buckle up, my friends, because we're diving headfirst into the economic marvel that was the Hellenistic world, a place where coinage flowed as freely as wine at a Greek symposium. But let me tell you, not everyone was toasting with gold goblets. Now, we've already seen how the Diadochi carved up Alexander's empire like a Thanksgiving turkey. What came next was a whirlwind of economic activity that would make Wall Street look like a farmer's market. First up, let's talk about those grandiose cities that rose from the dust, like Alexandria in Egypt and Antioch in modern-day Turkey. These weren't just your run-of-the-mill ancient cities. They were megacities for their time, urban centers that would have made any Roman emperor green with envy. Alexandria was founded by Alexander himself in 331 BCE, which was a strategic move, not just a vanity project. Situated on the Mediterranean coast, it was the ultimate gateway between East and West. We're talking about a city that boasted a population of over 500,000 at its peak, a colossal number for the ancient world, where most cities had populations that could fit inside a modern football stadium. Alexandria wasn't just a pretty face, either. It was a bustling hub of trade and culture, where you could buy anything from Indian spices to the latest philosophical treatise. It was home to the Great Library, a place so legendary that even today it symbolizes the height of ancient knowledge. The library supposedly housed over 500,000 scrolls. It was the Google of its day, only without the annoying pop-up ads. But let's not romanticize this too much. While the elites were busy debating philosophy and trading silk, the average Alexandrian was likely struggling to keep the roof over their head. The city was a patchwork of opulence and squalor, where the wealthy lived in lavish homes with indoor plumbing. Yes, the ancients were quite advanced in some ways, while the poor made do with whatever shelter they could find. And let's not even talk about the sanitation. A walk through the streets could be a hazardous journey, with open sewers and waste tossed out of windows like some bizarre ancient water balloon fight. Meanwhile, Antioch, founded by Seleucus in 300 BCE, was no slouch either. It was the crown jewel of the Seleucid Empire, strategically positioned to control trade routes between the Mediterranean and the Far East. With a population that also soared into the hundreds of thousands, Antioch was a vibrant blend of Greek and Eastern cultures. It was a place where you might hear a dozen languages in the marketplace, a cacophony of commerce that was music to any trader's ears. These cities were the epicenters of a booming trade network that extended from India all the way to the Mediterranean. The Silk Road was in full swing, a highway of commerce that saw goods and ideas travel thousands of miles. Spices, silk, gems, luxuries that would set a modern influencer's heart aflutter, were traded alongside more mundane but vital goods like grain and textiles. This trade wasn't just about wealth, it was about power. Control the trade routes, and you controlled the lifeblood of the ancient world. But here's the kicker. While the elites were getting richer than Croesus, the majority of the population was stuck in a cycle of subsistence living. Most people didn't have access to the wealth that flowed through their cities. Instead, they lived in simple huts, often with questionable plumbing, a far cry from the marble palaces of the elite. The gap between the rich and the poor was as wide as the Nile, a fact that hasn't changed much even in today's world, if we're being honest. Now, let's talk numbers, because what's history without a little math to jazz things up? The Hellenistic economy was booming, with coinage becoming more standardized and widespread. The introduction of the drachma, a silver coin weighing about 3 grams, facilitated trade across the Mediterranean. Inflation wasn't a modern invention either. It was a concern even then. Rulers sometimes debased their coins to stretch their budgets. Think of it as the ancient version of printing more money. The Hellenistic kingdoms were also heavily taxed, a necessary evil to fund the military campaigns and lavish lifestyles of the rulers. In Egypt, the Ptolemies imposed taxes on everything from land to livestock, a practice that would have made any IRS agent proud. Tax collectors were the unsung villains of the ancient world, feared and loathed by the populace, who saw their hard-earned produce and goods whisked away to fill royal coffers. Yet, despite the heavy taxes and economic inequalities, these kingdoms were vibrant centers of cultural exchange. Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian traditions mingled, creating a cultural tapestry as rich as the trade goods that filled the markets. It's a testament to the resilience of human creativity that even in times of economic disparity, art, literature, and philosophy flourished. The plays of Menander, the philosophies of Epicurus and Zeno, and the mathematical treatises of Euclid all found eager audiences in the Hellenistic world. The Hellenistic economy wasn't just about luxury goods either. Agriculture was the backbone, with vast estates producing grain, olives, and wine, the staples of ancient life. These agricultural products were the bread and butter of the economy, quite literally in some cases. Yet, even here, disparities reigned. Wealthy landowners controlled vast tracts of land, leaving small farmers at their mercy, a scenario that echoes through history in every feudal system and tenant farm. The Hellenistic kingdoms were a paradox, centers of innovation and inequality, where the grandeur of cities like Alexandria masked the struggles of the common people. They remind us that history is a story of contrasts, of beauty and brutality, of progress and poverty. The economic realities of the Hellenistic world were as complex as the people who lived them, a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of adversity. So, as we explore these ancient economic marvels, let's keep in mind that while the coins may have flowed freely, they often pooled in the hands of the few. The Hellenistic world was a place of dazzling cities and dire poverty, of grand ambitions and gritty realities. It's a tale as old as time, one that continues to unfold as we dig deeper into the past. Stay with me, because this journey through history is far from over. Now, let's zoom in on the Hellenistic world's intellectual scene, where philosophers and scientists were not just scholars in dusty robes, but the rock stars of their time. Forget about electric guitars and pyrotechnics. These guys wielded scrolls and abacuses, dazzling audiences with their groundbreaking ideas and discoveries. They were the original influencers, minus the Instagram accounts, but with more impact on the world than a viral TikTok dance. Start with Alexandria, the city that was to knowledge what Las Vegas is to neon lights. It wasn't just the economic hub of the Hellenistic world, it was the intellectual Mecca. The great library of Alexandria was the crown jewel of this knowledge empire, a colossal institution that housed over 500,000 scrolls. Imagine a place where you could read about everything from the latest mathematical theories to ancient Egyptian spells, all under one roof. It was the 3rd century BCE equivalent of the internet, only without the cat memes. The library wasn't just a repository of scrolls. It was a place where the brightest minds gathered to think, debate, and occasionally throw shade at each other's theories. Figures like Euclid, the father of geometry, were the Einstein of their day. His magnum opus, Elements, wasn't just a bestseller. It was the textbook for geometry for centuries, laying the foundation for everything from architecture to astronomy. Now, let's talk about Eratosthenes, the man who literally measured the earth. Using nothing more than a stick, a well, and a hefty dose of brain power, he calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy. He was off by just a few hundred kilometers. Not bad for a guy working without Google Earth. Who knew a shadow could tell you so much? Then there was Archimedes, the man who could turn a bathtub into a eureka moment. His contributions spanned from inventing war machines to explaining the principles of buoyancy. Archimedes was the kind of guy who could make physics sound like magic, and his screw pump is still used in irrigation today. Talk about a legacy that lasts. Most of us can't even keep a New Year's resolution. But let's not forget the philosophers. While the scientists were busy calculating distances and inventing things, the philosophers were pondering life's big questions. The Stoics and Epicureans were the Beatles and Rolling Stones of the philosophical world, each with their own take on how to live a good life. The Stoics, led by Zeno, taught that virtue was the highest good and emotions were to be controlled, a bit like ancient cognitive behavioral therapy. Meanwhile, Epicurus advised that pleasure was the greatest good, but not in the YOLO way you'd expect. It was more about simple pleasures and avoiding pain, which, let's face it, is advice we could all use at times. These intellectual pursuits weren't just academic exercises. They had real-world implications. For instance, the knowledge of geometry and physics improved engineering and architecture, leading to the construction of more sophisticated buildings and machines. Meanwhile, philosophical teachings influenced governance and personal conduct, shaping the moral landscape of the era. But here's the kicker. These intellectual endeavors were often a side gig for the rulers, who were more interested in political intrigue than philosophical debates. Sure, they funded libraries and sponsored scholars, but it was less about a love for knowledge and more about prestige. It was like collecting art to impress your friends, except with scrolls instead of paintings. Rulers like Ptolemy, I saw the value in hosting a hub of knowledge, not just for the advancement of science, but as a way to legitimize their rule and attract talented individuals from all over the known world. Of course, The romanticized image of the Great Library also has its fair share of myths. The idea that it was suddenly destroyed in a catastrophic fire is one of history's favorite legends. In reality, the decline was more of a slow burn, a result of neglect, budget cuts, and the general chaos that comes when empires crumble. It's a reminder that even the greatest institutions can fall victim to the bureaucratic equivalent of death by 1,000 cuts. Meanwhile, cultural exchange wasn't limited to the learned halls of libraries. The Hellenistic world was a melting pot where Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and even Indian influences mingled. This was a time when a Greek could enjoy Egyptian art, wear Persian clothing, and feast on Indian spices, all in one eclectic afternoon. The fusion of styles and ideas created a cultural richness that was as diverse as it was influential. The arts flourished in this environment, with Greek drama and sculpture taking on new forms infused with local elements. Theatrical performances were the Netflix of the ancient world, and sculptures captured not just the gods and heroes of Greek mythology, but also the everyday people of the time, warts and all. The realism of Hellenistic art was a far cry from the idealized forms of the classical period, reflecting a world that was as gritty as it was glamorous. So, as we marvel at the intellectual and cultural achievements of the Hellenistic age, let's remember that they were born from a world in constant flux. The legacy of this era is not just in the scrolls or statues, but in the way it set the stage for future developments in science, art, and philosophy. It was a time of great minds and great contradictions, where the quest for knowledge coexisted with the thirst for power. As we delve deeper into this fascinating chapter of history, keep in mind that while the philosophers and scientists were crafting the foundation of modern thought, the rulers were busy playing their high-stakes games of political chess. The story of the Hellenistic world is far from over, so stick around as we continue unraveling the threads of this complex tapestry. The next chapter promises even more twists, turns, and hopefully fewer open sewers. As the Hellenistic kingdoms continued their intellectual and cultural high-wire act, beneath the surface, cracks were quietly forming. These were the kind of cracks you might notice too late, right before your coffee table collapses, sending your prized mug crashing to the floor. The Hellenistic world was a tapestry of ambition and innovation, but it was also a realm teetering on the brink of change, thanks largely to the Romans, who were lurking like an ominous background score in a horror movie. Picture the Roman Republic in the 3rd century BCE, already flexing its muscles across the Italian peninsula, looking at the fragmented Hellenistic kingdoms like a hungry cat eyeing a distracted flock of birds. Rome wasn't just expanding, it was perfecting the art of empire building, one methodical step at a time. The Romans had a knack for playing the long game, treating geopolitics like a chess match, where each move was calculated, strategic, and most importantly, patient. And patience, as we know, is a virtue, especially when you're planning to conquer the known world. By the mid-2nd century BCE, Rome was making its presence felt. In 168 BCE, the Battle of Pydna marked a turning point. Here, the Roman legions, with their disciplined formations and relentless tactics, delivered a knockout blow to King Perseus of Macedon. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a signal that Rome was ready to tick the Hellenistic kingdoms off its to-do list. And let's not sugarcoat it. This was less about the glory of conquest and more about expanding influence and securing resources. Rome was the original realpolitik practitioner, understanding that power wasn't just about having the biggest army, but about controlling the economic and political levers that kept the ancient world spinning. The Roman Republic's rise wasn't purely about brute force. Their secret sauce included a keen eye for alliances and a penchant for turning former enemies into allies, or at least into less troublesome neighbors. By the time the 1st century BCE rolled around, the Romans were the ultimate puppet masters, pulling the strings behind the curtain while the Hellenistic kingdoms struggled to hold onto the spotlight. Speaking of strings, let's zoom in on the most famous thread in this tapestry, Cleopatra, Roman 7, the last pharaoh of Egypt. When Cleopatra sashayed onto the historical stage, the Hellenistic world was already on life support. But Cleopatra, with her charisma and cunning political acumen, was determined to make one last grand exit worthy of the history books. And what an exit it was, filled with romance, intrigue, and more drama than a soap opera marathon. Cleopatra's life was less about Shakespearean tragedy and more akin to a series of unfortunate events with a comedic twist. Born in 69 BCE, Cleopatra was thrust into a royal mess. The Ptolemaic dynasty was already wobbling like a Jenga tower in an earthquake, plagued by internal strife and external pressures. But Cleopatra was no damsel in distress. Fluent in several languages and a shrewd diplomat, she knew that survival meant playing the Romans at their own game, and she played it with flair. Enter Julius Caesar, the Roman general with a penchant for dice and destiny. Cleopatra famously wrapped herself in a carpet to meet Caesar, a move that was as much about theatrics as it was about survival. Their alliance was a strategic masterstroke, providing Cleopatra with the Roman support she needed to hold onto her throne. Together, they had a son, Caesarion, presenting an image of unity between Rome and Egypt. But as we know, the Roman political scene was as chaotic as a Shakespearean play with too many subplots. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's fortunes took another turn. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's charismatic but impetuous ally. Their relationship was a whirlwind, passionate, politically charged, and ultimately doomed. Antony and Cleopatra were the power couple of the ancient world, but their dreams of united empire were as fragile as their porcelain dinnerware. When Antony's forces were defeated by Octavian, later Augustus, at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, the writing was on the wall. Cleopatra's suicide in 30 BCE marked the end of the Hellenistic kingdoms, a dramatic finale that has captured imaginations for millennia. But let's be clear, while her death was tragic, it wasn't just about love lost. It was the last act of a queen who saw the inevitable and chose to exit on her own terms, rather than be paraded through Rome as a trophy of conquest. Her death symbolized the end of an era, the curtain closing not with a bang, but with a sorrowful farewell. So, what lessons can we draw from the decline of the Hellenistic kingdoms? For one, it's a stark reminder that even the most glittering empires can crumble under the weight of their own ambitions. The Hellenistic world was a mosaic of cultures and ideas, but it lacked the cohesive glue that Rome had mastered. The internal divisions and external pressures were compounded by the Roman juggernaut, which understood that true power lay in stability and control. The legacy of the Hellenistic kingdoms, however, is far from forgotten. They were the crucible for cultural exchange, where Greek thought mingled with Eastern wisdom, laying the groundwork for future intellectual and artistic achievements. The scientific advances, philosophical debates, and cultural innovations of this era have left an indelible mark on history, shaping the world in ways we still feel today. In the grand scheme of things, the Hellenistic period was a fleeting moment in the timeline of history, a burst of brilliance that faded as empires rose and fell. But its impact, like the stars in the night sky, continues to light our path, reminding us that while power is transient, knowledge and culture endure. As the Romans took center stage, they inherited a cultural legacy that enriched their empire, and by extension the world. So, as you drift off, pondering the rise and fall of these ancient kingdoms, remember that history is both a mirror and a mosaic. It reflects the ambitions, flaws, and triumphs of humanity, while weaving together the diverse threads of our shared past. The story of the Hellenistic kingdoms may have ended, but their echoes continue to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and resilience. Your eyes flutter open to the gentle sounds of water lapping against the stone walls of Venice. The morning sun is just beginning to peek through your window, casting a golden glow over the intricate patterns of your embroidered linen sheets. You're not just any Venetian, you're a lawyer in the bustling, chaotic, and utterly fascinating world of 12th century Venice. Not exactly a rock star, but in a place where trade and law are as vital as the canals themselves. You carry some serious clout. Before diving into the hustle and bustle, let's chat about what makes the legal system here tick. It's not just a hodgepodge of random rules. No, Venice is a unique blend of Roman law. Yes, the fancy stuff from the guys in togas and homegrown statutes. Picture it as a gourmet pizza with both classic and experimental toppings. Why the Roman influence, you ask? Well, the Romans, with their penchant for order and justice, left a lasting legacy across Europe. And Venice, being the savvy city-state it was, cherry-picked the best of Roman legal principles to keep its intricate web of commerce and governance running smoothly. But don't think for a second that they just copied and pasted. Venetian law was as homegrown as its gondolas. Now, let's talk about the top dogs of this floating city, the Doge and the Great Council. These weren't just any political figures. They were the rock and foundation of Venetian governance. The Doge, elected for life, was a bit like a monarch, but without the crown and with a lot more checks and balances. The Great Council, meanwhile, was a mix of noble families who kept the Doge's power in check, like a medieval version of corporate board members. This system was crucial in maintaining Venice's independence and prosperity amid the Italian city-states' constant bickering and the growing power of outside empires. So where do you, the lawyer, fit into all this? You're the glue holding these clashing interests together. Lawyers in Venice had to be as shrewd as the merchants and as wise as the council members. Sure, there weren't any bar exams or fancy certificates, but becoming a lawyer was no small feat. You'd need a solid education, often at one of the prestigious universities that dotted the Italian landscape. Bologna, for instance, was the Harvard law of its day, if Harvard had more Latin and fewer cocktails. Speaking of education, let's chew on some numbers. Getting that prized legal education could take anywhere from 3 to 7 years. And the price? Well, if you weren't born into a family that could foot the bill, you better have had a side hustle. Education was an investment, but one that paid dividends in the form of influence and a steady stream of ducati. Now, let's dispel a common myth, the idea of the lawyer as a universally respected figure. Sure, in Venice, you were needed, respected even, but you were also seen as a necessary nuisance. People loved to hate you and hated to love you, kind of like the taxman today, while folks relied on your expertise to navigate the murky waters of Venetian law. They also grumbled about your fees and your knack for making simple things sound complicated. But you're cool with that. After all, the job comes with its perks. You get to rub elbows with the city's elite, influence decisions that shape the future, and maybe, just maybe, ensure that justice is served, or at least that someone gets a fair shake. As you rise from your bed, ready to face the day, remember that you're part of a grand tradition. You're not just any lawyer. You're a Venetian lawyer, a vital cog in the machine of one of the most fascinating cities in history. And while it might not be all gondola rides and romantic sunsets, it's a life that offers its own unique blend of challenge and reward. So, grab your robe and your wits. It's time to step into the bustling streets of Venice and see what the day holds. Who knows? Maybe you'll help settle a trade dispute or draft a law that will be remembered for generations. Or maybe you'll just have a really good story to tell over dinner. Either way, it's all in a day's work for a 12th century Venetian lawyer. So, with a quick flick of your cloak and a mind sharp as a Venetian blade, you step out into the labyrinthine streets, ready to tackle whatever legal conundrums the day throws your way. The early morning air is thick with the scent of the sea and the distant clamor of merchants setting up stalls. It's a scene that's equal parts chaos and charm, perfectly encapsulating the unique economic landscape of 12th century Venice. Now, let's dive into this economic cocktail. Venice wasn't just a city, it was the beating heart of Mediterranean trade. Picture this: ships from Byzantium, the Islamic world, and all over Europe crammed into the Grand Canal, trading everything from silk and spices to wool and wine. City's prosperity was built on the backs of these maritime merchants who were as daring as they were shrewd. But where there's trade, there's trouble, or at least the potential for it. That's where you, the lawyer, come in, navigating the tricky waters of commerce with the dexterity of a gondolier in a storm. Let's talk trade disputes. With goods flowing in from every corner of the known world, misunderstandings were as common as gondolas on the canals. A shipment of pepper from the east goes missing. A batch of silk is not quite as silky as promised. These were the bread and butter of a Venetian lawyer's day. Contracts were your Bible, meticulously drafted to cover every contingency. After all, when your goods are halfway across the Mediterranean, a simple handshake won't cut it. You needed legal assurances that your investment wouldn't vanish into the salty abyss. In this world of high-stakes commerce, trust was everything, but so was the cold, hard clink of currency. Enter the Venetian gold ducat, the bling of the medieval world. Introduced in 1284, it became the standard currency for international trade. Talk about a golden ticket. But wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves. In the 12th century, you were still dealing with a motley crew of coins: Byzantine solidi, Islamic dinars, and silver pennies from across Europe. Each had its own value, and the savvy lawyer needed a head for numbers to navigate the complex currency conversions. And let's not forget about legal fees. A lawyer's time is money, as they say, and back then, your expertise didn't come cheap. Depending on the complexity of the case, your fee could range from a few silver coins to a hefty pile of ducats. Sure, some folks might gripe about the cost, but can you really put a price on peace of mind? In a city where fortunes could be made or lost on the turn of a tide, having a sharp legal mind in your corner was worth every penny, or ducat, as it were. But here's a gut-punching reality check. Not everyone could afford your services. The rich merchants and powerful patricians had no problem lining their pockets with legal advice, but the average Venetian was often left to fend for themselves in the murky waters of commerce. It's a stark reminder that while Venice was a city of opportunity, it wasn't exactly an egalitarian utopia. The economic divide was as wide as the Grand Canal, and lawyers like you were often caught in the middle, balancing the scales of justice with the weight of your own purse. Speaking of balance, let's bust a myth. The romantic notion of Venice as a city of eternal charm glosses over the gritty realities of its economic engine. Sure, the architecture was stunning, and the culture was vibrant, but behind the scenes, legal battles raged over every conceivable issue, from maritime insurance to inheritance rights. As a Venetian lawyer, you had to be part detective, part diplomat, and part mathematician, juggling laws that were as fluid as the waters surrounding the city. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility and a fair share of grumbling. Clients love to gripe about lawyers' fees and their penchant for legalese. Sound familiar? It seems some things never change. But despite the complaints, your role was indispensable. You were the bridge between the merchant's ambitions and the harsh realities of medieval commerce, ensuring that Venice's economic heart kept beating. As you weave through the bustling streets, heading to your first appointment, you can't help but marvel at the city's resilience. Here, where East meets West, you've got a front-row seat to the grand theater of trade, politics, and law. Who knows what the day will bring? A complex trade dispute, a groundbreaking contract negotiation, or just another story to tell over a goblet of wine at the end of the day. Whatever the case, one thing's for sure. In the ever-shifting sands of the medieval economy, your skills as a lawyer are as essential as the city's foundations. So, keep your wits about you and your mind sharp. There's a whole world of commerce waiting to be navigated, and you're just the person for the job. As you weave through the bustling streets, heading to your first appointment, you can't help but marvel at the city's resilience. Here, where East meets West, you've got a front-row seat to the grand theater of trade, politics, and law. Who knows what the day will bring? A complex trade dispute, a groundbreaking contract negotiation, or just another story to tell over a goblet of wine at the end of the day. Whatever the case, one thing's for sure. In the ever-shifting sands of the medieval economy, your skills as a lawyer are as essential as the city's foundations. So, keep your wits about you and your mind sharp. There's a whole world of commerce waiting to be navigated, and you're just the person for the job. With the morning's frenzied energy now simmering into the measured pace of midday, you find yourself at the threshold of the Doge Palace. This isn't just any building. It's the pulsating heart of Venetian governance, where the city's most pressing matters are dissected and debated. Today, you're headed to a legal battleground that would make any modern courtroom drama look like child's play. Welcome to the world of maritime law, 12th century style. Inside, the air is thick with anticipation. Merchants, sailors, and fellow legal eagles all gather, each with their own stake in the day's proceedings. You're here for a case that promises more twists and turns than a gondola ride through the city's labyrinthine canals. The Dispute, a classic tale of lost goods and broken promises, set against the backdrop of Venice's bustling maritime trade. Here's the scoop. A shipment of prized Genos olive oil has vanished somewhere between the Venetian lagoon and the docks of Constantinople. The merchant blames the ship's captain for negligence. The captain claims the merchant's instructions were as clear as the canal's murky depths. Cue the courtroom theatrics, complete with heated testimonies and the occasional dramatic flourish. Now let's debunk the myth of swift medieval justice. If you're picturing a quick, decisive resolution, think again. The Venetian courts were more marathon than sprint, with cases dragging on for weeks, even months. The reason? a meticulous approach to evidence, testimony, and precedent. This isn't some Wild West free-for-all. It's a methodical process designed to ensure that every angle is examined, every stone turned. As the case unfolds, you get a first-hand look at the art of argumentation in a time long before PowerPoint presentations and forensic evidence. Lawyers like you had to rely on wit, rhetoric, and a keen sense of strategy to sway the judges. Forget TV dramas where the truth is revealed in a dramatic courtroom confession. This is a game of chess, with every move calculated to tip the scales in your favor. Take a moment to appreciate the weight of precedent here. Venetian law wasn't just a set of rules. It was a living, breathing entity shaped by past decisions and the ever-evolving needs of the city. Precedent was your North Star, guiding you through the legal fog. In this case, you're banking on a previous ruling that emphasized a captain's responsibility to ensure the safe transport of goods, regardless of the merchant's instructions. But let's not sugarcoat it. The courtroom was as much a stage as it was a place of justice. Lawyers, witnesses, and even the judges themselves could be prone to a bit of showmanship. Eloquence was your weapon, and a well-timed rhetorical flourish could be the difference between victory and defeat. Imagine a theatrical performance where the stakes are as high as the Rialto Bridge, and the audience holds the power of fate in their hands. As the day wears on, the court is awash with arguments, counter-arguments, and the occasional exasperated sigh. But beneath the surface drama lies the true engine of Venetian justice, patience. This was no quick fix, but a slow, steady grind toward resolution. It's a reminder that while the wheels of justice may turn slowly, they do eventually reach their destination. Now, here's a little slice of reality that might burst your romantic bubble. Not every case had a clear-cut hero or villain. Often, it was a matter of interpreting the gray areas, where morality and legality danced their delicate waltz. In the end, the goal wasn't to punish the guilty, but to restore balance and ensure the smooth flow of commerce. As the session draws to a close, you're left with more than just a verdict. You've witnessed the delicate interplay of law, commerce, and human nature, a complex tapestry that defines the Venetian legal system. It's not always glamorous, but it's a vital part of Venice's unique charm. So, what's the takeaway from today's courtroom saga? Perhaps it's the realization that justice is less about grand gestures and more about the incremental steps that lead to a fair outcome. Or maybe it's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, in this city of merchants and mariners, your role as a lawyer is as essential as the tides that shape its destiny. Whatever the lesson, one thing's for certain. As you step back into the sun-drenched streets, the day is far from over. There's still much to be done, and countless stories waiting to unfold in this ever-fascinating city. So, keep your chin up and your arguments sharp. The world of Venetian law is yours to conquer, one case at a time. Stepping out into the Venetian afternoon, you leave the echo of courtroom drama behind and head towards a different kind of stage, the local tavern. Here, the real politicking happens, lubricated by wine and the camaraderie of shared interests. Forget the stuffy halls of the Doge's Palace. This is where alliances are forged and broken over a pint. It's a world where your career as a lawyer can be made or shattered, not by the sharpness of your legal mind, but by the deftness of your social maneuvering. The tavern, nestled between the winding streets and the ever-present canals, is a hub of activity. As you walk in, the smell of roasted meats and the sound of boisterous laughter greet you. You're not here just for a drink. You're here to navigate the complex web of social networks that could propel your career to new heights, or sink it faster than a leaky gondola. Social networking in medieval Venice isn't just a LinkedIn connection request. It's an art form, and you're about to paint your masterpiece. Now, let's talk about the guilds. Picture them as medieval LinkedIn groups, but with a lot more influence and a dash of rivalry. These guilds were the backbone of Venetian society, bringing together individuals with similar professions or trades. For a lawyer, aligning with the right guild was crucial. It was like having a backstage pass to the concert of life, granting you access to resources, clients, and most importantly, the ear of those in power. But don't let the romantic notion of guilds as cozy fraternities fool you. They were as much about competition as they were about support. Sure, they provided a safety net, but they also ensured you never got too comfortable. Rival lawyers within the same guild could be your fiercest competitors, each vying for the same plum cases or influential patrons. It's a tightrope walk, balancing camaraderie with competition. You've got to have the agility of a circus performer to stay on top. Speaking of staying on top, let's dive into the economics of your afternoon libations. A pint of wine in 12th century Venice would set you back about a denaro or two, depending on the quality. That's roughly the cost of a decent meal, so you'd better make that wine work for you. It's not just about drinking, it's about negotiating, schmoozing, and building your personal brand. Think of it as the medieval version of a business lunch, where deals are sealed with a handshake and a hearty laugh over a shared joke about the latest political debacle. Ah yes, the politics. Venice was a city built on trade, and by extension, on politics, a delicate dance of power and influence that could rival any modern-day political drama. Lawyers like you often found yourselves in the thick of it, navigating the murky waters of Venetian intrigue. Over shared drinks and dark humor, you and your colleagues might joke about the Doge's latest decree or the Great Council's endless debates, knowing full well that these decisions could impact your livelihood as much as the tides affected the city's foundation. In this world, dark humor was a survival mechanism, a way to cope with the absurdities of life in a city perpetually on the brink of change. It's the kind of humor that acknowledges the ridiculousness of it all, the endless negotiations, the Byzantine bureaucracy, the way fortunes could rise and fall on the whims of a storm or a political shift. You and your fellow lawyers might laugh about a recent case where a merchant tried to claim a storm was an act of God, conveniently forgetting that his ship was already leaking like a sieve before it left port. But beneath the jokes lies a stark reality. Venice's politics are as complex as its canals, and navigating them requires more than just a sharp legal mind. It requires an understanding of human nature, of the motivations and ambitions that drive people to make decisions that can ripple across the city like a pebble dropped in a pond. As you sit in the tavern, nursing your pint and listening to the chatter around you, you can't help but marvel at the intricate tapestry of alliances and rivalries that define Venice. It's a city where the personal and the political intertwine, where every conversation is a potential opportunity or a hidden trap. In this world, your reputation is your currency, and your ability to read between the lines is as valuable as gold. So, what's the takeaway from this afternoon in the tavern? It's a reminder that in Venice, the real power lies not just in the legal texts, but in the people who interpret them. It's a world where relationships matter as much as rulings, and where a well-placed word can carry more weight than a stack of legal documents. As you finish your pint and prepare to head back into the labyrinth of Venetian life, you know that the day is far from over. There are still deals to be made, alliances to be forged, and of course, stories to be shared over another pint of wine. In this city of merchants and mariners, where the past and present collide in a symphony of commerce and culture, you are both a participant and an observer, navigating the tides of history one conversation at a time. So, keep your wits sharp and your humor even sharper. The world of Venetian law is as unpredictable as the sea itself, and you're just the person to chart its course. As the sun begins its descent, casting a golden hue over the labyrinth of canals and cobblestone streets, you find yourself reflecting on the day, a tapestry woven with the threads of commerce, law, and politics. Venice, with its romantic allure of gondolas and grand architecture, is often portrayed as a city of beauty and intrigue. But for those like you, navigating its legal waters, it's a place where the veneer of charm often gives way to the gritty realities of daily life. Let's strip away the romanticized facade for a moment. Yes, Venice is stunning, a city that seems to float on water, defying the laws of nature itself. Yet, beneath its shimmering surface lies a world of contradictions. The same canals that inspire poets also serve as the city's sewage system, a fact less likely to grace a postcard. The grandeur of the Doge Palace, with its ornate halls and opulent chambers, is built on the back of relentless ambition and the complexities of Venetian politics. This is a city where beauty and practicality exist in a delicate balance, much like the life of a lawyer in its midst. Your day might seem glamorous to an outsider, debating maritime law in the Doge Palace, sharing drinks with influential merchants, and rubbing elbows with the movers and shakers of this floating metropolis. But the truth is, the life of a 12th century Venetian lawyer is as much about grit as it is about grandeur. Your mornings start with a quick mental inventory, assessing the latest trade disputes and the ever-changing political landscape. Each day is a chess game, requiring strategic moves and a keen sense of timing. Consider the challenge of balancing tradition with modernity. Venetian law, a blend of Roman principles and local statutes, is as intricate as the city itself. You're constantly walking a tightrope, adapting age-old laws to the evolving needs of a bustling trade hub. The legal system here isn't just about justice. It's about maintaining the delicate equilibrium that keeps Venice afloat, both literally and figuratively. And this isn't just a metaphor for a city on water. It's a daily reality where the stakes are as high as the Rialto Bridge. As dusk settles, let's debunk another myth, the notion of Venice as a utopia of fairness and equality. The truth is, the city's prosperity is not evenly distributed. The economic divide is as wide as the Grand Canal, with wealthy patricians and merchants on one side and struggling artisans and laborers on the other. Your role as a lawyer often places you in the middle of this divide, advocating for those who can afford your services while witnessing the struggles of those who cannot. It's a stark reminder that justice, like the city itself, is often a matter of perspective. Yet, in this world of disparities, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that your work contributes to the city's resilience. Venice thrives on its ability to adapt and innovate, and as a lawyer, you're a part of that legacy. Whether it's drafting contracts that protect merchants' interests or resolving disputes that could disrupt trade, your efforts help ensure the city's continued prosperity. It's not always glamorous, but it's an essential part of the Venetian story. As you reflect on these realities, it's worth considering the philosophical underpinnings of your work. In a city straddling tradition and emerging modernity, justice isn't a static concept. It's a living, evolving entity, shaped by the interplay of law, commerce, and human nature. Your role as a lawyer isn't just to interpret laws, but to apply them in a way that reflects the ever-changing dynamics of Venetian life. It's about finding balance between old and new, between individual interests and the common good. Now, let's talk about legacy. As the day winds down and the city is bathed in the soft glow of twilight, you're reminded that your work is part of something larger. The decisions you make today will ripple through the city's future, much like the tides that shape its shores. Every contract you draft, every dispute you resolve, contributes to the intricate tapestry of Venetian history. It's a humbling thought, one that underscores the significance of your role in this vibrant, ever-evolving city. And so, as you prepare to leave the bustling streets for the quiet sanctuary of your home, take a moment to appreciate the complexity and beauty of your chosen path. The life of a Venetian lawyer is one of challenges and rewards, a journey that mirrors the city itself, where beauty and grit coexist, and where tradition and modernity are in constant dialogue. It's a life that demands resilience, adaptability, and a keen understanding of the human condition. As you close the door behind you and the sounds of the city fade into the background, you're left with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The day may be over, but the story of Venice, and your role in it, continues. In this city of canals and contradictions, you found a place where your skills and insights can truly make a difference. And as you drift off to sleep, lulled by the gentle lapping of water against the stones, you know that tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities. But for now, you've earned a moment of rest, secure in the knowledge that you are a vital part of the living tapestry that is medieval Venice. You jolt awake to the clamor of Notre Dame's bells, each one a not-so-gentle reminder that medieval Paris doesn't believe in snooze buttons. It's the 14th century, so your day starts as any self-respecting scribes would, with a bowl of porridge that might make modern oatmeal look like gourmet food. This isn't your trendy, steel-cut oat variety. It's more of a medieval mystery mush with the consistency of wallpaper paste. At least it's warm, which is more than can be said for your scribe's quarters, a drafty nook just shy of cozy. Once you've fortified yourself with breakfast, and by fortified, I mean you've managed to swallow it without gagging, it's time to tackle the day's main event, the scribble grind. You know, the one that's got you hunched over parchment like a medieval Quasimodo, minus the architectural aspirations. Speaking of parchment, let's talk costs. This stuff isn't cheap. Each sheet could run you a few deniers. That's right, you're paying for the privilege of riding on what is essentially the medieval equivalent of a blank Word document. And if you think you're getting a bulk discount, think again. This is the 1300s, not Costco. Your workspace is set up in the heart of bustling Paris, where the streets are as lively as they are fragrant. Spoiler alert, they're pretty fragrant. Just around the corner, the marketplace is a cacophony of haggling merchants and the occasional goat bleat. It's a place where you can find anything from fresh bread to the latest in medieval fashion. Think tunics, not TikTok trends. And while these streets are teeming with life, they've got none of the modern conveniences. Parisian cobblestones might be picturesque, but they're hell on your medieval loafers. As you settle into your work, you're reminded that being a scribe isn't exactly the romantic, candlelit endeavor you've seen in the movies. Forget elegant script flowing effortlessly from quill to parchment. This job is the medieval version of being a human photocopier. And while the ink stains add a certain artistic flair to your fingers, they're a pain to wash out. Ink, mind you, is another expense. Made from oak galls, iron salts, and gum arabic, it's a cocktail of ingredients that sounds more like a witch's brew than office supplies. Now, let's debunk a myth while we're at it. The notion that scribes were revered intellectuals. Sure, some were, but many were just the medieval equivalent of data entry clerks. Your job is less about crafting literary masterpieces and more about copying the same text over and over until your eyes cross. Still, it's not without its charms, like the occasional marginalia. Those cheeky little doodles scribes added to the margins. Totally a thing. Think of them as medieval memes, little artistic rebellions against the monotony of transcription. As the sun climbs higher, you take a moment to appreciate the bigger picture. The 14th century is a time of great change. The 100 Years' War is raging, the Black Death looms ominously on the horizon, and the papacy has been uprooted to Avignon. These are turbulent times, and as a scribe, you're part of a world that's recording every historic hiccup and upheaval, one painstakingly copied page at a time. You're not just a witness to history, you're its reluctant chronicler. But back to the task at hand. The marketplace outside is a microcosm of medieval life, and while you might be stuck indoors, you can hear its pulse. Vendors shout their wares, a symphony of commerce echoing off stone walls. It's organized chaos, a dance of survival where every transaction is a step in the grand ballet of medieval economics. The denier you spend on parchment might have just changed hands half a dozen times by the end of the day, each exchange a small story in the vast narrative of medieval Paris. As the day stretches on, you're reminded of the social hierarchy that defines your world. Paris is a city of stark contrasts, where opulent cathedrals stand in the shadow of teeming slums. Your role as a scribe places you somewhere in the middle, not quite a monk, not quite a merchant, but respected enough to move between different social circles. It's a delicate balance, and it keeps you keenly aware of the political and social currents swirling around you. Lunch, if you can call it that, is another bowl of porridge or a piece of bread, maybe with a smattering of cheese if you're feeling particularly indulgent. Meals in the 14th century are more about sustenance than satisfaction, functional affair that leaves you just full enough to keep working but not so stuffed that you want to nap. And you definitely don't want a nap. The work of a scribe waits for no sleepyhead. So, with ink-stained fingers and a mind buzzing with the hum of medieval life, you dive back into the scrolls. Each stroke of the quill is a tiny act of defiance against the encroaching darkness of ignorance. It's not glamorous, and it's certainly not easy, but it's history in the making. And as the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the parchment, you know that tomorrow will bring more of the same. But that's a story for another time, because today's work is far from done. The sun may be setting, but your day as a medieval scribe is far from over. Your parchment is now a battlefield of ink splotches, each a testament to the struggle between a steady hand and a quill's rebellious streak. Speaking of ink, let's dig into this medieval concoction that's as much a chemistry experiment as it is an artistic endeavor. Forget about popping down to the local stationery shop. Creating ink in the 14th century is a process that would make even the most seasoned barrister's head spin. Your ink starts its life as gall nuts, those unassuming little growths on oak trees that look like nature's own version of a bad hair day. These nuts are the secret weapons of scribes everywhere, packed with tannic acid, which is crucial for making ink. You'll need a few handfuls of these, which would set you back about 1 or 2 deniers, pocket change for the essential tool of your trade. But don't get too excited. There's still a long way to go before you're scribbling masterpieces. Next comes the iron salt, often sourced from rusted nails or old iron scraps. Medieval recycling at its finest, folks. Combine this with the gall nut extract, and you've got the beginnings of ink. Add in some gum arabic for thickness and a touch of water, and voila, you've got the medieval equivalent of printer toner. It's a cocktail that's equal parts alchemy and necessity, with a hint of "do not try this at home" vibes. The result is an ink so permanent that even modern archivists nod approvingly at its longevity. As you dip your quill into this freshly brewed batch, you're reminded that the tools of your trade are as finicky as they are essential. Quills, usually sourced from the feathers of geese or swans, require a level of maintenance that puts your average houseplant to shame. You've got to cut and shape them just right, ensuring the nib is sharp yet supple. It's like trying to find a pair of jeans that are both comfortable and stylish, a feat that's practically mythical. Now, let's talk about the Guild of Scribes. The medieval LinkedIn long before the internet was even a glimmer in humanity's eye. This guild is your ticket to professional recognition in a world that's not exactly overflowing with career opportunities. They regulate your work, making sure that each manuscript is up to snuff and that you're not skimping on quality. It's a fraternity of ink-stained comrades, all bound by the same mission, to bring the written word to those who can afford it, or at least pretend they can. Membership in the guild isn't just a badge of honor. It's a lifeline in an era when job security is as fleeting as a summer breeze. Without the guild's backing, you're just a lone wolf in a world of pack animals, struggling to compete against the tide of bureaucracy and noble patronage. The guild ensures that you're paid, though not necessarily well, and that your work is recognized, even if it means you're perpetually hunched over a desk, eyes squinting at Latin script that dances across the page like a caffeinated squirrel. Despite the guild's efforts, scribes often find themselves in a financial limbo. Your pay might hover around 5 to 10 deniers per day, which sounds decent until you realize that a single chicken costs 3 deniers. Talk about a pecking order. You're the unsung hero in the noble class's quest for literacy, a role that's more vital than vaunted. While the nobles get the glory of appearing learned, you get the glorious task of making it happen, one cramped letter at a time. The social dynamics of your world are as intricate as the illuminated manuscripts you copy. Nobles might take the credit for being well-read, but without you, they'd be as literate as the stone gargoyles adorning Notre Dame. You're the invisible force keeping the wheels of knowledge turning, even if those wheels are more like creaky cartwheels than sleek sports tires. As the evening deepens, you take a moment to contemplate your place in this medieval tapestry. The city of Paris, with its bustling marketplaces and towering cathedrals, feels both vast and intimate. You're a part of something bigger, a silent participant in the grand narrative of history. Yet the personal sacrifices you make, endless hours, pittance pay, and ink-stained fingers, are all too real. It's a life of contradictions, where the allure of intellectual pursuit is balanced precariously against the grind of daily survival. But despite the hardships, there's a certain romance to it all. You're not just a cog in the machine, you're the ink that writes its story. And though your work may not earn you fame or fortune, it earns you something far more enduring, a place in the annals of history, however small. As you pack up your tools for the night, streets outside quieting under the weight of twilight, you know that tomorrow will bring more of the same challenges, but it will also bring something else, the chance to contribute your own little chapter to the story of your time. So, as you finally lay your head down in your drafty nook, you can rest easy knowing that your work, while often overlooked, is an essential thread in the fabric of medieval society. You're not just a scribe, you're a keeper of knowledge, a curator of culture, and a silent partner in the intellectual exploits of the age. And that, dear scribe, is worth every ink stain and cramped finger. So, as you finally lay your head down in your drafty nook, you can rest easy knowing that your work, while often overlooked, is an essential thread in the fabric of medieval society. You're not just a scribe, you're a keeper of knowledge, a curator of culture, and a silent partner in the intellectual exploits of the age. And that, dear scribe, is worth every ink stain and cramped finger. Now, as the sun reaches its zenith, signaling lunchtime in medieval Paris, your stomach gives a not-so-subtle reminder that sustenance is due. Enter your midday meal, a humble affair of bread and cheese. Yes, folks, that's right. No grand banquets or lavish spreads here. Those epic feasts with overflowing tables and endless courses, those were more Hollywood than history for the everyday Parisian. Your fare is more grab and go than sit and savor. Bread in the 14th century is as common as croissants in a modern Parisian bakery, but let's not sugarcoat it. This isn't artisanal sourdough fresh from a hipster bakery. It's more like the hardtack sibling of today's baguette, designed to last and fill bellies, not win culinary awards. The cheese, if you're lucky, might be a local favorite like brie, soft enough to spread and flavorful enough to make the bread go down easier, but not so fancy it'll break the bank. While you chew your modest meal, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the absence of it on your plate: meat. In medieval times, meat was a luxury reserved for the wealthy, a delicacy that separated the haves from the have-nots. It's not that medieval folk didn't enjoy a good roast, they just couldn't afford it. If you think inflation is bad now, imagine a pound of beef costing more than a week's wages for a commoner. So, your peasant-friendly lunch is less about indulgence and more about survival. And what about those legendary feasts you've heard about, with tables groaning under the weight of peacocks and swans? Sure, those happened, but only in the halls of nobility. The rest of us were left to fantasize about such culinary escapades while gnawing on another crust of bread. The medieval food pyramid was less of a pyramid and more of a steep, unclimbable cliff for anyone outside the aristocracy. The disparity in diet mirrored the social hierarchy, with noblemen dining on game and peasants subsisting on gruel. As you masticate on this reality, the afternoon calls you back to duty. More scribing awaits, and with it, the ever-present political turbulence of the era. The 100 Years' War is raging on, a drawn-out conflict between England and France that's as much about land and power as it is about egos and grudges. Picture it: kings and nobles playing a high-stakes game of chess, with peasants like you stuck as the pawns, maneuvering through a battlefield of taxes and conscription. The war has a ripple effect on everyday life, and as a scribe, you're on the front line of documentation. The chronicles you pen today will inform future generations about the chaos and calamity of your time. It's a sobering thought, knowing that the ink you spill might one day be the only record of these tumultuous years. You're recording not just battles, but the human cost that comes with them, the families displaced, the towns razed, and the economies strained under the weight of war. The political climate is as volatile as the ink you use, with alliances shifting like sand in an hourglass. The French King Charles V, known as the Wise, has recently regained some territories lost to the English, but it's a precarious peace at best. And let's not forget the looming shadow of the Black Death, which has decimated populations and left survivors questioning the wrath of divine forces. It's a time when the ink on your page is as black as the mood in the air. As you continue your work, you're keenly aware that every line you write contributes to the tapestry of history. Scribes like you are the silent chroniclers of the human condition, capturing the triumphs and tragedies of an age. Your role might not come with accolades or wealth, but it's a vital one nonetheless. You're the unseen witness to the rise and fall of kings, the chronicler of events that will shape the world long after you're gone. Sure, the work is repetitive, and the pay is meager, but there's a quiet dignity in knowing that your efforts are preserving the past for the future. And while you might not be fighting on the battlefield, your quill is a weapon in its own right, a tool for truth in an era too often clouded by myth and misinformation. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows across your parchment, you pause to reflect on the ironies of your existence. You live in a world where the written word is both revered and restricted, a commodity for the privileged few. Yet here you are, a scribe in the heart of Paris, turning thoughts into tangible records. It's a paradox that's as much a part of your life as the ink stains on your fingers. And so, you press on, each stroke of the quill a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. You're not just writing words, you're crafting a legacy, one that will endure long after the parchment has yellowed and the ink has faded. Because in the end, history is written by those who dare to pick up the pen. As the ink dries and the shadows stretch longer across your parchment, it's time to dive into another facet of medieval life that's often bathed in the glow of nostalgia, a glow that could use a healthy dose of reality check. Let's talk medicine and education in the 14th century, where the popular image of universal ignorance is as misguided as a quack doctor with a leech obsession. First, let's tackle the realm of medieval medicine, a topic rife with myths and misconceptions. Picture practitioners wielding tools of the trade that look more like instruments of torture than healing. Sure, medieval barber surgeons performed bloodletting with the enthusiasm of a modern-day influencer plugging their latest product. But hey, they were working with what they had, which admittedly wasn't much. Forget about cutting-edge tech or MRI machines. Medieval healers were more likely to diagnose you based on the alignment of the stars or the color of your urine. Yep, you heard that right. Urine was the medieval version of a diagnostic app. Yet, before we dismiss these folks as the snake oil salespeople of their era, let's give credit where it's due. The medical knowledge wasn't entirely in the Dark Ages. Monasteries served as early hospitals, and herbal remedies weren't just grandma's specialty. They were the cutting-edge pharmaceuticals of the day. Take the use of willow bark to relieve pain, which, unbeknownst to them, contained salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. That's right. Medieval medicine had its moments, even if it came wrapped in a cloak of mystery and superstition. And now, education. Cue the image of dusty tomes and candlelit study sessions. While it's true that literacy rates were lower than today, the idea that everyone was as illiterate as a rock is a bit of a stretch. The University of Paris, a hotbed of scholastic debate and intellectual ferment, was the medieval Ivy League. Established in the 12th century, it drew students and scholars from across Europe, eager to dissect Aristotle's teachings with the fervor of a fan dissecting the latest plot twist in a hit TV series. Education wasn't just for the elite, either. Sure, nobles could afford private tutors, but many students were of modest means, surviving on a diet of bread, beans, and a whole lot of ambition. The curriculum was a rigorous mix of the trivium and quadrivium, fancy words for grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Forget electives. This was a one-size-fits-all education that left students either enlightened or exhausted. And yes, Latin was the lingua franca, turning even the simplest conversation into a linguistic workout. Scribes like you played a pivotal role in this intellectual ecosystem. The texts you copied were the lifeblood of medieval academia. Imagine the University of Paris without the manuscripts you meticulously reproduced. It would be like a modern university without Wi-Fi. You were the unsung heroes, ensuring that knowledge wasn't just a flash in the pan, but a roaring fire of learning that could be passed down through generations. And let's not forget those pesky backaches that come with the job. Hunching over a desk for hours on end is no small feat, and medieval ergonomics weren't exactly up to OSHA standards. The wooden stools and hard benches of your scribing station were about as comfortable as a medieval hair shirt. Forget about lumbar support. Your only recourse was the occasional stretch, and perhaps a little prayer for relief. Yet despite the physical toll, the work was intellectually rewarding. You were at the nexus of knowledge creation and preservation, a key player in the great conversation of the time. The texts you copied, whether theological treatises or scientific explorations, were more than mere words on parchment. They were the building blocks of a cultural renaissance that would eventually burst forth in all its glory. The intellectual scene in Paris was a vibrant tapestry of ideas and debates, with scholars arguing points as passionately as today's pundits argue politics. The medieval university was not a quiet place of solitary study, but a dynamic arena of intellectual combat. Students and professors alike engaged in verbal jousts that could make the fiercest Twitter exchange look like a polite afternoon tea. And while the university was a beacon of learning, it wasn't without its controversies. Theological disputes often mirrored the political tensions of the day, with the church keeping a watchful eye on academic discourse. The line between heresy and innovation was as thin as a vellum page, and crossing it could lead to censure or worse. But this atmosphere of tension also spurred creativity, pushing scholars to explore new ideas within the bounds of orthodoxy, at least officially. As for your role, dear scribe, you were more than just a passive participant. Your work was crucial in disseminating knowledge beyond the cloisters of academia. The manuscripts you produced found their way into the hands of scholars, monks, and even the occasional curious noble. You were a conduit for ideas, ensuring that the intellectual currents of your time flowed far and wide. And speaking of flowing, let's address the economic undercurrents that shaped your world. The cost of parchment, ink and quills added up quickly, making your work a luxury that not everyone could afford. It's a reminder that knowledge, like most things in medieval society, was a commodity, one that required both skill and resources to produce. As the afternoon wanes and the bells of Notre Dame toll in the distance, you're reminded of the delicate balance you navigate daily. You're a scribe caught between the demands of your craft and the broader currents of history, a witness to both the glories and the struggles of your time. And while the backaches and ink stains are a constant companion, they're a small price to pay for the privilege of contributing to the tapestry of knowledge. So as the sun dips below the horizon, casting the city in a golden glow, you take a moment to appreciate the world around you. Medieval Paris, with all its contradictions and complexities, is a place of vibrant life and enduring legacy. And you, dear scribe, are an integral part of it all, a keeper of knowledge, a purveyor of wisdom, and a silent chronicler of the human experience. With each stroke of your quill, you write not just words, but history itself. And that, my friend, is a tale worth telling. And just as the sun dips below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the cobblestones of Paris, you know it's time to trade the ink-stained paraphernalia for a tankard of ale. It's off to the local tavern, a cornerstone of medieval social life, where the air is thick with stories, and let's be honest, a fair bit of bardy odor. Ale in the 14th century is less craft brew and more medieval Gatorade, hydrating the weary and washing down the day's grime. It's a low-alcohol concoction, far from today's IPA, but perfectly suited to quenching a scribe's thirst after a day in the Parchment trenches. As you step inside, the tavern is a hubbub of activity, laughter, shouting, and the occasional off-key tune played on a lute that's seen better days. It's a place where the social strata blur ever so slightly. Nobles, merchants, and labourers alike share the space, united in their quest for a momentary escape from the rigours of medieval life. It's here that the oral tradition reigns supreme. In a world where literacy is a privilege and books are as rare as hen's teeth, storytelling is the glue that binds the community. Bards and travellers regale the crowd with tales of heroism and folly, each story a thread in the rich tapestry of shared human experience. In this dimly lit room, you're reminded of the true power of words, not just inked on parchment, but spoken aloud, shaping perceptions and creating connections. Before the printing press revolutionized information dissemination, stories were the lifeline of knowledge and culture, passed down with the urgency of a game of medieval telephone. It's a reminder that while your scribing work might seem solitary and mundane, it feeds into this larger tradition. Each manuscript you copy is a potential story, waiting to be told around a flickering fire. The tavern also serves as a microcosm of medieval society, a place where gossip flows as freely as the ale. It's here that you hear whispers of the latest political intrigues, the shifting alliances, and perhaps even a rumor or two about the English King Edward Roman III latest maneuvers in the on-again, off-again skirmishes of the 100 Years' War. It's a place to catch wind of the latest economic trends, whether the grain prices are soaring or if there's talk of a new tax to fund the king's coffers. And let's not forget the tales of the Black Death that still haunt the collective memory, a dark shadow that lingers over every conversation. As the night deepens, the tavern becomes a theatre of life, each patron an actor in their own story. It's a place where dreams and reality collide, where the hardships of daily life are temporarily forgotten in a haze of camaraderie and ale. Yet, beneath the joviality lies the harsh reality of a scribe's existence, a life of relentless work, financial precarity, and the constant struggle to maintain a foothold in a world that can be as unforgiving as it is fascinating. But there's a romance to it, isn't there? The image of the solitary scribe, toiling by candlelight, crafting words that will outlive them. It's the allure of being part of something greater, a custodian of knowledge in an age when information was power. You might not have the riches of a merchant or the influence of a noble, but your work is a crucial link in the chain of history. Each manuscript you copy is a testament to the resilience of human curiosity and the desire to understand the world. As the chatter in the tavern ebbs and flows, You reflect on your place in this medieval mosaic. The ink stains on your fingers may be a mark of your trade, but they're also a badge of honor, a symbol of your contribution to the intellectual landscape of your time. It's a rare and special thing to be part of, even if it doesn't always feel that way when you're squinting at another Latin text in the dim light of your scriptorium. Eventually, the evening winds down, and the tavern slowly empties as patrons trickle out into the night, their laughter and songs echoing down the cobblestone streets. You too make your way home, the cool night air a welcome respite from the warmth and noise of the tavern. As you walk, the city of Paris unfurls around you, its history-rich streets whispering tales of those who came before and those yet to come. The life of a scribe is one of contradictions, caught between the romantic ideal and the gritty reality. Yet in this duality lies its beauty. You're a silent chronicler of your era, a purveyor of stories that will echo through time. Each day, with every stroke of your quill, you contribute to the legacy of human knowledge, ensuring that the voices of your time are not lost to the sands of history. As you climb into your humble bed, the events of the day replaying in your mind, you understand that your role, while often overlooked, is invaluable. You're a guardian of the written word, a steward of culture, and a crucial link in the grand chain of human history. And that, dear scribe, is a legacy worth ink-stained fingers and a tired back. So as you drift off to sleep, know that while the world outside may be tumultuous and uncertain, your place within it is secure. You're a scribe, a keeper of the flame of knowledge, and in the end, isn't that what history is all about? Passing the torch from one generation to the next, ensuring that the past informs the future. And with that thought, you let the weight of the day slip away, ready to rise again with the morning light and continue your quiet, noble work. Once upon a time, in a Germany that smelled more like coal dust than bratwurst, a boy named Nikolaus Otto popped into the world in 1832, a year that promised more revolutions than a spinning top. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and the air was thick with the clatter of steam engines that were as efficient as a broken umbrella in a monsoon. But hey, they were the hot new thing, literally. Steam engines were both the heroes and the villains of the era, churning away like overworked kettles, and Otto's world was about to be spun by one such contraption. Nikolaus was born in Halshausen, a quaint little dot on the map of Westphalia, where the most exotic thing was probably a cow wearing a particularly dashing bell. His father, a farmer, and his mother, presumably the queen of practicality, had no idea that their son would one day tinker with machines that would set the world on fire, metaphorically, of course. Otto grew up surrounded by the rhythmic thump of manual labor and the occasional cursing at stubborn machinery, which, let's face it, was probably a more effective lullaby than any rockabye baby. Now, let's not pretend young Otto was some kind of mechanical prodigy, building engines out of spare parts before he could walk. No, he was just a curious kid in a time when curiosity could either lead to innovation or a swift clip around the ear. But there was something about gears and cogs that attracted him, like a moth to a particularly intricate and potentially dangerous flame. School wasn't exactly his jam, with its rigid structure and Latin conjugations. But Otto was more interested in the art of making things go vroom, even if vroom then was more of a chug-chug. The mid-19th century was a time when steam engines were considered the majestic beasts of the industrial world, and they were about as reliable as a politician's promise. These machines were the muscle behind factories, railways, and ships, but their appetite for coal was insatiable, and their efficiency was laughable. Fuel consumption was through the roof, and the sheer bulk of these engines made them about as portable as a grand piano. It was a world crying out for innovation, even if it didn't know it yet. Young Otto entered adulthood with dreams bigger than his pocketbook, which was, to be fair, not much more than a glorified lint collector. His first foray into the business world was about as successful as a fish trying to climb a tree. In the 1860s, he tried his hand at selling sugar, a venture that turned sour faster than you could say diabetes. It was a classic case of wrong product, wrong time, and probably wrong. But if history teaches us anything, it's that failure is just another word for try again, or at least that's what people say to feel better about it. Now, before we give Otto too much credit for his resilience, let's acknowledge that failure was practically a rite of passage in the 19th century. The economic landscape of the time was a roller coaster of booms and busts, and entrepreneurs were either geniuses or madmen, often both. Otto's sugar debacle was a wake-up call, a reminder that he needed to find something he was not only passionate about, but also competent in. So, like any good story, he went back to the drawing board, literally, with sketchbooks full of mechanical doodles. He realized that if he wanted to make a mark, he'd need to tackle the beast that was engine technology. The industrial landscape Otto was navigating was a treacherous one, dominated by titans like the steam engine, which, let's be honest, was more stubborn than a mule with a hangover. The inefficiency of steam engines was an open secret, whispered among engineers and shouted by frustrated factory owners. But the real kicker was that despite their flaws, steam engines were the backbone of industrial progress, a bit like a creaky old bridge that everyone was too afraid to replace. Otto's determination to revolutionize engine technology wasn't born out of a romantic vision of changing the world. It was more about the practical realization that there had to be a better way to harness power, a way that didn't involve burning through coal like it was confetti. His keen mechanical mind saw the potential in the four-stroke cycle, an idea that was floating around but hadn't yet found its champion. Otto was about to change that, but not before a few more bumps on his journey. The stage was set for Otto to make his mark on history, but the path was anything but clear. He had to navigate the murky waters of industrial Germany, where innovation was both celebrated and feared, often in equal measure. His story is one of grit, failure, and the kind of relentless curiosity that keeps you tinkering away in a dimly lit workshop long after everyone else has called it a night. Otto's journey was just beginning, and he was about to discover that making engines was not just a mechanical challenge. It was a quest to redefine what was possible in a world that was just starting to believe in the power of innovation. As Otto tinkered away in his dimly lit workshop, his path unexpectedly crossed with Eugen Langen in 1864, an encounter that could be best described as serendipity meeting desperation. Langen was the kind of guy who had a knack for spotting potential where others saw only failure. He was an engineer with a keen business sense, which in the 19th century was rarer than a unicorn at a horse race. Together, these two were about to shake the very foundations of engine technology, and not just because of Otto's legendary knack for getting soot everywhere. They teamed up to form Otto and Cy, a partnership that was the industrial equivalent of a buddy cop movie. One was meticulous and visionary, the other practical and driven. Otto and Langen were united by a shared belief that the era of steam was on its last legs, puffing away like an asthmatic dragon. Their goal, to build an engine that was leaner, meaner, and didn't require its own coal mine to keep running. Their collaboration bore fruit in the form of the atmospheric gas engine, which could have been marketed as the engine that actually works, in an era where reliability was as elusive as a politician's tax returns. This contraption was a marvel of ingenuity, operating on a principle that would later become the backbone of internal combustion engines. It wasn't just a machine. It was a statement to the world that the days of the steam behemoth were numbered. The engine's design was based around the four-stroke cycle, a concept that was as revolutionary as it was misunderstood in its day. Picture this: intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Sounds like a fitness regime, but it's actually the heart of modern engine technology. This cycle allowed Otto's engine to be more efficient, a game-changer in a world where efficiency was often a theoretical concept discussed in hushed tones by engineers over strong drinks. In 1867, Otto and Langen's atmospheric engine made its grand debut at the Paris World Exhibition, dazzling visitors with its performance, and let's be honest, its ear-splitting clatter. Winning a gold medal at the exhibition was akin to receiving a royal seal of approval, only with less pomp and more practical implications. It was a triumph for German engineering, and for Otto, it was validation that his vision wasn't just a pipe dream. It was a reality, albeit one that still sounded like a metallic orchestra in the throes of a particularly heated argument. But here's the thing: the engine wasn't perfect. Sure, it was a leap forward, but it still had its quirks, like a prized racehorse with a penchant for bucking at the finish line. It was noisy, prone to breakdowns, and its appetite for gas was almost as voracious as its steam-powered predecessors were for coal. Yet, despite these flaws, it was a step in the right direction, a move towards efficiency and practicality that couldn't be ignored. Economically, the timing couldn't have been better. The industrial world was hungry for innovation, and Otto's engine was the main course. Factories were popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm, and they needed engines that could keep up with the relentless pace of production. Otto's engine offered a glimpse into a future where power wasn't just about brute force, but about smart engineering. A future where energy efficiency would become the new gold standard. Politically, Germany was in a state of transformation, unifying into a powerhouse that would soon rival the established empires of Europe. Otto's invention was part of this narrative, a testament to German ingenuity and a tool that would help fuel the nation's industrial ambitions. It was a time when innovation was not just encouraged, but celebrated, a period when inventors were the rock stars of their day, albeit ones with more grease under their fingernails than glitter in their hair. Now, let's debunk a common myth. Otto's journey to success wasn't a straight line of genius moments and triumphant accolades. It was a jagged path littered with setbacks, each one a reminder that progress is often a messy business. His relentless quest for efficiency was driven not by a desire for fame, but by a practical need to solve real-world problems, a testament to his character as much as his intellect. Otto's story is a classic tale of perseverance, a reminder that behind every great invention lies a mountain of failures, each one shaping the eventual success. His partnership with Langen was the catalyst that turned potential into reality, a collaboration that showed the world what was possible when vision met execution. The atmospheric gas engine may have been born in a time of coal and steam, but it pointed the way to a future of internal combustion, setting the stage for the automotive revolution that would soon follow. In the grand tapestry of history, Otto's engine was a thread that connected past to future, a symbol of innovation in an era defined by change. His work laid the groundwork for a new kind of power, one that would eventually transform not just transportation, but the very fabric of society. As we look back on his achievements, it's clear that Otto wasn't just building engines, he was building the future, one stroke at a time. And the best part, his journey was far from over. The world of engine technology was still evolving, and Otto was determined to be at the forefront of this revolution, driven by a belief that the best was yet to come. Otto's journey through the engine world was just starting to pick up speed. By 1876, Otto's brainchild, an engine that would do more for humanity than 1,000 steam kettles ever could, rolled off the drawing board and into reality. This was the four-stroke internal combustion engine, the engine that would eventually become the heart of every car, bus and truck, and even the odd lawnmower. It was a game-changer, a piece of machinery that turned the chug of the Industrial Revolution into the roar of the 20th century. This was the Otto cycle, a term that sounds like it could be a trendy fitness class, but is actually the foundation for modern engine technology. Now, let's talk about the Otto cycle, a name that, frankly, could use a bit more pizzazz. But don't let the underwhelming title fool you. This cycle was revolutionary. It consisted of 4 strokes: intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Basically, it was the engine's version of eat, sleep, rave, repeat. It was efficient, powerful, and most importantly, it didn't require a small forest's worth of coal to function. With this invention, Otto had effectively shrunk the steam engine's bulk and hunger into something that could fit under the hood of a carriage, or as we like to call it today, your average car. While Otto's engine was a technical marvel, its journey from workshop to world domination was anything but smooth. Imagine unveiling your masterpiece to the world, only to find out that everyone and their uncle has a claim to your thunder. Enter the patent disputes, the legal equivalent of a medieval joust, but with more paperwork and fewer horses. Otto's patent for the engine was filed in 1877, a move that was supposed to secure his place in the history books, but the path of innovation is rarely without its potholes. In the world of 19th century engineering, having a patent was like holding a golden ticket, except everyone else wanted a piece of it too. Before long, Otto found himself embroiled in a legal battle that would make even the most hardened lawyer break out in a cold sweat. Etienne Lenoir, a Belgian engineer who had dabbled in engines before Otto had even picked up a spanner, came knocking with a lawsuit in 1884. Lenoir claimed that Otto's engine was more inspired by than original. It was a claim that threatened to blow a hole in Otto's legacy big enough to drive a steam locomotive through. The ensuing legal battle was the kind of drama that could rival any courtroom thriller. Otto, armed with his patent and a fleet of lawyers, squared off against Lenoir in a showdown that was as much about ego as it was about engines. The stakes were high, not just for Otto and Lenoir, but for the whole industry. The outcome would determine who got to claim the title of engine pioneer and who would be left in the dust. In the end, Otto's patent was upheld, but not without a few bruises. The court acknowledged Lenoir's earlier work, a nod to the fact that innovation is often a collaborative, albeit contentious, affair. Otto might have won the battle, but it left a mark on his psyche and his reputation. It was a sobering reminder that in the race to innovate, history is often written not just by the victors, but also by those who can afford the best lawyers. Despite the legal wrangling, the engine's practical applications were undeniable. It was a marvel of efficiency, a glimpse into a future where transportation was faster, cheaper, and more accessible. Economically, the timing couldn't have been better. Europe was in the grips of industrial expansion, and factories were hungry for engines that didn't guzzle resources like a teenager at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Otto's engine was perfect for the job, a lean machine that promised to revolutionize industrial power. Politically, the world was shifting too. The unification of Germany in 1871 had created a new powerhouse, eager to flex its industrial muscles. Otto's invention was part of this narrative, a testament to German engineering prowess in an era when national pride was tied to technological achievement. The engine wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of progress, a mechanical ambassador for a nation on the rise. As we dive deeper into Otto's legacy, it's important to debunk the myth of the lone genius. Otto was a visionary, yes, but his success was built on the shoulders of countless engineers, inventors, and tinkerers who came before him. The Otto cycle was an evolution, not a creation ex nihilo. It was a reminder that innovation is often a communal effort, a tapestry woven from many different threads. Otto's engine was more than just a machine. It was a catalyst for change. It ushered in an era of internal combustion, laying the groundwork for the automotive revolution that would soon follow. It was a piece of technology that transformed not just how we moved, but how we lived. The world was shrinking, and Otto's engine was the magic carpet that promised to take us anywhere we wanted to go. In the grand scheme of things, Otto's story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the relentless pursuit of innovation. His journey was marked by triumphs and tribulations, each one shaping the legacy he left behind. Otto's engine may have started as a sketch in a dusty workshop, but it went on to change the world, one stroke at a time. As we wrap up this chapter of Otto's story, remember that innovation is as much about the journey as the destination. It's a process fraught with challenges, setbacks, and the occasional legal skirmish. But it's also a journey filled with possibility, a reminder that with the right mix of vision, grit, and a bit of luck, you can change the world. Otto's story isn't over yet, so stay tuned for the next exciting installment of this mechanical saga. Who knows what other twists and turns lie ahead? As we rev the engine of history back into gear, the world was just beginning to feel the tremors of Otto's invention. The internal combustion engine wasn't just a mechanical marvel. It was the spark plug for the second industrial revolution. By the late 19th century, Otto's creation was transforming factories and transportation networks faster than you could say horseless carriage. This was a time when cities were expanding, industries were booming, and horses were starting to eye retirement with mixed feelings. Let's talk numbers for a moment. By 1900, there were over 8,000 cars chugging along the roads of the United States alone, thanks in no small part to Otto's engine. While this might seem like a pittance compared to today's traffic-jammed highways, it was a seismic shift from just a few decades prior. Before this, the closest thing to a traffic jam was a herd of cattle crossing Main Street. The internal combustion engine made transportation more than just a necessity. It was becoming an industry in its own right. The economic impact of Otto's engine was like dropping a turbocharger into the economy. Factories that once relied on hulking steam engines began to adopt the more compact and efficient internal combustion engines. This wasn't just about saving space, it was about saving money too. The new engines consumed fuel more efficiently, reducing the costs of running a factory. By the 1880, the cost of producing power with an internal combustion engine was about half that of a steam engine, a statistic that had factory owners rubbing their hands with glee and coal suppliers grumbling into their soot-stained handkerchiefs. Yet, with every leap forward, there are those left grappling in the dust. As factories switched to internal combustion engines, the demand for coal saw a relative dip, leading to economic ripples in regions dependent on coal mining. This was one of those paradoxical moments when progress and disruption walked hand in hand, a reminder that innovation can be a double-edged sword. Transportation was the next frontier to fall under Otto's influence. The advent of the horseless carriage, as cars were charmingly dubbed, was a game-changer. These newfangled contraptions were a source of fascination and fear. They were faster, noisier, and less prone to leaving unpleasant surprises on the streets than their equine counterparts. The cultural shift was palpable. Imagine a world where the loudest thing on the street was the clip-clop of hooves, suddenly replaced by the roar of combustion engines. It was as if someone had turned up the volume on life itself. For the urban landscape, this was revolutionary. Roads that once echoed with the sounds of horse-drawn carts were now the domain of motor cars. By 1910, New York City had over 20,000 automobiles, a figure that signaled the dawn of a new age. Cities quickly adapted, paving roads and installing traffic signals to manage the burgeoning automobile population. The internal combustion engine didn't just change how people got around. It changed how cities were planned and how people lived. But let's not romanticize too much. There were bumps along this road to progress, literally and figuratively. Early cars were notorious for breakdowns and required a certain mechanical aptitude just to keep them running. The joke was that owning a car was like having a high-maintenance pet, one that drank gasoline and occasionally threw a wrench in your plans, quite literally. Yet, despite these hiccups, the allure of speed and independence was irresistible. The broader social impact was equally profound. The automobile was more than a mode of transport. It was a symbol of freedom and status. Cars allowed people to travel further for work and leisure, contributing to the growth of suburbs and the concept of the daily commute. The weekend getaway became a possibility, paving the way for tourism as we know it today. In essence, Otto's engine was a catalyst for social mobility, not just in the literal sense, but in the societal one too. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, or in this case, great noise. The internal combustion engine was as loud as it was powerful, and the roar of engines became the new soundtrack of modern life. For some, this was the sound of progress. For others, it was an unwelcome intrusion. Urban noise pollution became a reality, a small price to pay, perhaps for the convenience of modern transport. In the countryside, the impact was equally significant. Farmers began using internal combustion engines in tractors, transforming agriculture in profound ways. By the 1920s, the number of tractors in use in the United States had soared to over 250,000. This mechanization of farming meant increased productivity and efficiency, allowing fewer workers to manage larger plots of land. It also spelled the end for many traditional farming jobs, a bittersweet reminder of progress's relentless march. Yet, the charm of the old ways lingered. Romantic notions of pastoral life persisted even as the realities of rural labor shifted. There was a nostalgia for the simplicity of horse-drawn plows and the quiet of pre-engine days. It's a classic case of the grass always being greener on the other side, or in this case, the fields being quieter before the tractors came. Politically, Otto's invention played into the hands of nations eager to showcase their industrial might. Germany, in particular, saw the internal combustion engine as a testament to its engineering prowess. The engine became a symbol of modernity, a mechanical ambassador that traveled the world, leaving clouds of dust and the scent of progress in its wake. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. The introduction of the internal combustion engine wasn't a simple case of out with the old, in with the new. It was a time fraught with tension between tradition and innovation, a period when society was learning to balance the benefits of progress with the costs of disruption. In our next installment, we'll delve deeper into the personal and professional rivalries that fueled this era of innovation. We'll explore how Otto's engine continued to evolve, setting the stage for the automotive revolution that would cement its place in history. So, buckle up, because this ride through the annals of invention is far from over. The road ahead is as unpredictable as it is exciting, and there's plenty more to discover. As we steer into the final stretch of Otto's mechanized journey, it's time to park the myths and take a closer look at the man behind the engine that changed the world. Nikolaus Otto, despite being a pivotal figure in the annals of engineering, wasn't the solitary genius working in a vacuum as some tales would have you believe. Instead, think of him as a maestro orchestrating a symphony of innovation, with a little help from his friends, and sometimes his rivals. Let's rewind to the late 1800. Otto's invention had set the wheels of the Second Industrial Revolution spinning faster than a kid on a sugar rush. Yet, the narrative of Otto as a lone hero in this saga is about as accurate as claiming a cat nap is the same as a full night's sleep. The truth is, Otto's success was a team effort, bolstered by partnerships and the cumulative knowledge of his predecessors. His collaboration with Eugen Langen wasn't just a footnote, it was the backbone of his achievements. Without Langen's business acumen and financial support, Otto's ideas might have remained mere sketches in a dusty workshop. While we're myth-busting, let's address the notion that Otto single-handedly propelled the world into the age of internal combustion. Sure, his four-stroke engine was revolutionary, but it wasn't conjured from thin air. Otto built on the groundwork laid by earlier inventors like Etienne Lenoir and Alphonse Beau de Roches. Their contributions were stepping stones in the journey to efficient power, albeit stones that Otto polished to a mirror finish. This isn't to diminish Otto's achievements, but to highlight a fundamental truth of innovation. It's a relay race, not a solo sprint. So, what about Otto's personal legacy? Sadly, our protagonist didn't bask in the glow of his engine's success for long. By the time the 20th century rolled in, Otto had already taken his final bow, passing away in 1891 at the age of 58. His engine, however, was just warming up. The automotive industry, still in its infancy when he died, would soon blossom into a behemoth that reshaped societies, economies, and the very landscape of the earth. Otto's legacy is etched not just in the annals of engineering, but in the everyday hum of life as we know it. His engine transformed transportation from a luxury for the few into a staple for the many. By 1920, the number of automobiles in the United States alone had skyrocketed to nearly 9 million, a testament to the engine's impact and a far cry from its humble beginnings. The internal combustion engine became the beating heart of modern mobility, powering everything from family cars to freight trucks and even airplanes. Otto might not have lived to see it, but his invention was the spark that ignited a century of progress. The broader economic implications were nothing short of seismic. Industries that had once relied on steam power embraced the internal combustion engine for its efficiency and versatility. The ripple effects were felt across sectors, from manufacturing to agriculture. As tractors equipped with Otto's engines plowed through fields, they heralded a new era of agricultural productivity, helping to feed a rapidly growing global population. The engine was a tool of empowerment, enabling enterprises to scale new heights and individuals to explore new horizons. Politically, Otto's invention was a symbol of the industrial prowess that nations flaunted on the global stage. Germany, in particular, rode the wave of automotive innovation, with car manufacturers like Mercedes-Benz and BMW eventually becoming household names synonymous with engineering excellence. The internal combustion engine was more than a piece of machinery. It was a badge of national pride, a testament to the ingenuity and ambition of its people. Yet, for all the accolades and achievements, Otto's story is a reminder of the quieter revolutions that often go unnoticed. His engine didn't arrive with the fanfare of a thunderous revolution. It was more like the persistent hum of change, gradually altering the fabric of society. While the steam engines of yore were grand, noisy, and impossible to ignore, Otto's internal combustion engine was a subtler force, one that quietly underpinned the modern world. Reflecting on Otto's legacy, it's clear that his contribution was less about grand gestures and more about practical impact. He didn't just invent an engine. He created a tool that empowered others to dream bigger, travel further, and build a future that was once unimaginable. In doing so, Otto demonstrated that sometimes the most profound revolutions start not with a bang, but with the gentle purr of an engine coming to life. So here's to Nikolaus Otto, not as the lone genius of legend, but as a visionary who stood on the shoulders of giants, forging a path that others would follow. His legacy isn't just in the machines that bear his name, but in the world they helped create, a world where distance is no barrier and mobility is a birthright. As we reflect on his life and work, let's remember that true innovation is a collaborative endeavor, a symphony of ideas that, when played together, can change the world. And in the end, isn't that the greatest legacy of all?